Wait, in session one, who welcomes? Okay. We're live.
Asia Pa, hola a todos y todas. Welcome everybody. We're very excited to have you all here and in Bilbao, in Spain. And also we greet to our online audience. This is Joyce Mendez. I'm a social entrepreneur and member of the Youth Advisory Council for the United Nations. And basically we are going to have an amazing session. We're 4 sessions we have
Yeah.
actually. Welcome, Jabri. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks, Joyce. Hi, everyone. My name is Jabri Ibrahim. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, and I work for the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions. It's under the UNFCCC. And we're having a really packed session today. And Joyce and I here are wrangling 30 pages of script, so you'll bear with us.
Right.
But,
so I think.
yeah.
So how are you feeling, and what do you think about the full today, like this? Full
I think
session,
it's
like?
exciting. I'll walk us through. We have 4 main kind of pillars of session, starting with session 1 called Scaling Climate Actions on Existing Frameworks, where we will welcome our friends Bjorn, Jeremy, Elsie, and then we'll go to session 2 on innovation, investment, and impact, talking about entrepreneurial experiences with Duval, Bethlehem, Benel, and Akhilesh for some virtual participation. Then session 3, making climate action your career, climate career, Joyce. We have climate career, so we have a lot of insight here. And then we'll finish off with intergenerational solidarity, making youth engagement meaningful, which is your bread and butter.
Perfect.
And have discussions on YAG with former colleagues.
Yeah, so I guess people are wondering why it is actually Young Climate Innovators. So it's actually a platform for young professionals and students aged 18 to 35 and organized by Innovate for Climate in collaboration with the Global Partnership Program of the World Bank Group and the Global thank you. And the Global Youth Climate Network, a volunteer initiative of the World Bank Group Youth to Youth community to learn and exchange ideas and the role in scaling up climate action and resilient recovery through intergenerational dialogue and peer-to-peer engagements, focusing actually in the different topics of Innovate for Climate. So we're going to have our first speaker. She's Hania Dawood. So we welcome you on stage. So Hani is the practice manager for climate financing, finance and economic unit to the climate change group at the World Bank. Her role leads for over around 30 professionals to deliver climate analytics and diagnostics and support client countries on carbon markets, as well on carbon pricing and innovation in international carbon markets. Wow. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joyce and Jabri. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. After 2 years of holding I4C virtually, thrilled to see so many of you in person. I know we have a lot of folks join online as well. So for those joining online, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First, a quick round of thanks. Thanks to our I4C donor partners, the government of Spain and Germany. Thanks to our co-partners from the World Bank, the Global Youth Climate Network, and Connect for Climate. Thanks to the World Bank team that helped put this together, Mitek, Mylan, Kaya, and Ines. And last but not least, and most importantly, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment and your passion to this agenda. And thanking you, and thank you for everything that you do to remind us that this is an intergenerational challenge, that this is a challenge that will affect you and future generations, frankly, much more than it is affecting most of us today. As some of you know, YCI is an associated event alongside I4C. I4C brings together world experts focused on climate finance and carbon markets. And you being here as part of I4C is absolutely critical. It's easy to be short-sighted when the effects of climate change aren't immediately felt by some. We know they are by others, especially in developing countries, which have been hardest hits by floods, droughts, hurricanes, livelihoods being lost, food and water insecurities are being exacerbated by climate change. And your voice is critical to hold us all accountable and to turn up the volume on the urgency of this crisis. We at the World Bank think we've been working hard at this challenge. We've reached level records of adaptation and mitigation, climate finance. We are committing to align our financing flows with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And we've committed to push ahead to deliver cutting-edge climate analytics and diagnostics. And as part of what we're calling the Evolution Roadmap, we're looking to do more. We're looking for more ways to scale up climate finance support for our client countries and the most vulnerable across the globe. And here with us today, some of you are entrepreneurs, some of you are community organizers, some are active participants in global fora, such as the COP, some are technical experts developing cutting-edge tools and techniques to tackle this challenge. And I really hope you will use this session today to share ideas, learn from one another, network and connect to strengthen coalitions. And Mitik was telling me that there's already a WhatsApp group going on, and she was saying it'll be good for coordination. I was saying it's even better for long-term connections and partnerships. So with this, my colleagues and I are looking forward to learn from you, to be inspired by you, and we really hope you'll find today's session, rich and energizing. I know this is my favorite session of this conference. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Sonia. I just didn't have access to my microphone. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Hannah, for that insight. I mean, there's a lot of expectation, a lot of eyes on the World Bank group to kind of deliver on climate. So I'm really keen that we are convening this session, and youth is still a priority within the World Bank. I want to introduce maybe the poll. I should have introduced that earlier, but there's a poll going on before this session. Maybe we can, tech team, we can introduce the results of that poll before we immediately go into session one. Yeah, so we're kind of where you're tuning in from today, and there's two countries, Bilbao and Uganda. And those are the only two countries, I think, being introduced. But I think people will be joining in as we go. Yeah, and it's Europe and Africa. There's no Latin America.
No, but so, we have people here in
Latin America.
Room, so we can ask them as well.
And yeah, there's a lot of climate sectors that we are working on. I think Jason and I were both in the energy sector.
As well.
And
exactly.
There's, I think, unbiased opinion, but it's the best sector to be in right now.
And adaptation and nerd.
Yeah, technology mitigation, adaptation. But yeah, let's go to session one, existing frameworks, okay. Where we'll have Bjorn, Jeremy, and Elsie. We'll be discussing kind of what they do, COP27, some of the initiatives, including Y4C. So maybe Jess, I'll pass to you now.
Perfect, thank you. So we want to welcome them on stage. Perfect. Can you join us? So I'm gonna be introducing, please take a seat. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you for the mic. Yeah, with Jorn. So he's an international policy advisor for the International Emissions Trade Association, focused on Article 6 and carbon markets in Asia Pacific. So please tell us a little bit about, your work, and also what sort of, innovative market solutions you're bringing to the ground, and what are the opportunities available for us, for young people in that sector?
Sure, okay, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. I arrived from Singapore actually late yesterday, so I'm a bit jet-lagged, so if I say anything stupid, I blame it on that. But I think, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So I want to start also by kind of commenting on Hania's remarks, which I think were excellent start and setting the tune of today. So obviously, as young people, we didn't cause this problem. We did not cause this problem. But we have the opportunity and the responsibility to solve it. Because we cannot trust the people who caused the situation where we are today to also solve it. We cannot trust the people who benefit from the current system to also change it. So I think that's where we, as young people, have a very important role to play, to actually see through these systems and through the existing frameworks and essentially think about and vision the future we want and see how can we shape that together as young people, because we are now, but we are also the future, so we need to take control over it. And I think to do this effectively, we need to understand what are the systems and frameworks in place. Who are the people, the organizations that shape the current system, and how can we, as individuals and as organizations, change that? So what are the power structures that govern our world? And I think we need to find what inspires us in that challenge. So, of course, all of us are inspired by different things, and we have different topics of interest, different abilities that we can use in the climate challenge, but everyone is needed. And I think that's also very important, right? So you can be an artist, you can be a singer, you can be a policy specialist, but everyone is needed in this challenge. And we here today also need to communicate that to the wider society that is not here today. So how can we involve everyone in this challenge? And of course, I believe strongly that policy is a very important tool. It's maybe the most important tool, and especially the tool that young people are less involved in, I would say, from a solutions perspective. So what we have seen is there's a growing movement of people essentially outlining the problem, right? So we all know what the problem is at this point. I think we all know what it is. But what are the solutions to actually tackle the problem? And how can we communicate those solutions to people in power, to policymakers in an effective way? So I think that's where kind of the next step of the youth climate movement needs to go. That's what I'm focused on at IETA as an international policy advisor. We, as the International Emissions Trading Association, we essentially look for market-based climate solutions. So we help businesses, we help governments to develop effective and high-integrity carbon markets that can essentially help us deliver on the climate targets. Because at some point we need to reach net zero or even beyond net negative emissions. And we will have some residual emissions, some emissions that are very, very hard to abate. And in that case, it will be an opportunity to essentially pay between countries or between parties to facilitate those solutions that are needed. So I will be very quick, but I also want to say that we need to think of our journey in the climate space as planting seeds, right? So whatever we do is planting a seed. And planting a seed can be in whatever sector, whatever kind of opportunities you engage with. It's about planting a seed for change and then nurturing that seed, watering that seed, keeping care of that tree, of that plant, so that it continues to grow, so that it can continue to change. Because we need to know that this climate problem or sustainability in general will not be over in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, not even 50 years. We will have to continue to deal with this for our entire lives, no matter if we solve it or not, right? But every ton counts and every action counts. So I really believe we need to see this as the seeds that we plant and then take care of them. So that's like the quick introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think it's very interesting to see about how kind of youth can also be part of these, carbon markets, and how as well we can train youth to get there, right? To be ready for that. Because sometimes I hear carbon markets and I think of, like people over 40 maybe working in that area. So I think that is very important. So.
Microphone to Jeremy. Yeah, I think what's key in carbon markets is integrity. And the value needs to remain in the communities managing those natural spaces. Mm-hmm. So that's really key for me, and especially coming out of Kenya and Africa, where carbon markets is being operated by a lot of foreign actors. But that's just some reflections I thought. I see my brother here is agreeing with me. Jeremy, you're from Seychelles. It's a small island developing state. the issue of climate is really existential for SIDS. And also, I know OASIS and SIDS were instrumental in achieving that ambitious 1.5 goal. So let me introduce you, and I want to hear a lot of your kind of perspectives as well. So Jeremy is a former climate change and ocean advisor to the Seychelles, and has an environmental law background, and is also part of Y4C, Global Shapers, and Sustainable Ocean Alliance Young Leader. So I want to just hear your perspectives about COP27 in terms of youth, leading up to COP28, and also kind of the StockTech program. And also just to let you know that we were working a lot with a lot of AIMS Youth Hub, including a lot of people from Seychelles and St. Marshall's on the Youth Pavilion. So I just want to hear your perspective of how COP27 landed. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the questions, and good morning. From my side, it's very interesting when we talk about the whole UNFCCC process and the COPs that we have. And when we thought about COP27, everybody would have said it's the COP for Africa, it's the adaptation COP, but I think what everybody found was it was a loss and damage COP. And I would definitely agree with you, I'm definitely biased on this, but I think AOSIS played a huge part in putting it on the program and ensuring that out of the many topics that are raised at this COP, an instrumental decision was made. I want to also say that in front of AOSIS, as part of AOSIS, youth played a huge role. Angelique Pouponneau, who's the former CEO of the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, something I'm sure people at the World Bank might be aware of. Mikai Robertson, both people within under 30 or just over 30. And so youth in SIDS play a huge role because we're being capacitated to take on these challenges. AOSIS, with its 39 states, of which 37 are UN members, we contribute less than 0.00. It can keep going down, but you get the idea. Mm-hmm. And the situation we had in 2022, where we had the chair of the G77, which represents 80% of the world's population. Pakistan was affected by some of the worst floods. So 30% of the land area was basically flooded. Millions of people were affected. Hundreds, if not thousands, I believe, died and suffered extreme loss and damage. And as Prime Minister Mia Mottley would say, death, loss, and damage. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the landmark decision and the ongoing discussions that will lead to COP28, where we find out a bit more what's being discussed when it comes to loss and damage fund, it will be interesting, and I hope we all pay attention to this, because the finance that we're talking about there is something that is meant to go to not just small island developing states, but the global south, those who find themselves in this situation of not causing this. And when we talk about that, that's very much the youth. But we also have to understand that we're part of this legacy, and what we do with these finances is key. So I hope that begins to understand where I'm at with COP27. And there are also many other topics we could go in there. The global stocktake, which I followed quite a lot with another person from Suriname, it's meant to be the monitoring and evaluation, the report card of how we're doing with the Paris Agreement. And we are 6 years on, well, no, actually 7 years on from from 2015. And this monitoring and evaluation process, we haven't exactly agreed on it. It's the first time it's been done. It's meant to inform the NDCs. I would say it's not going to provide us necessarily new information, but who's going to say we're getting an A for climate action right now as a world, as collective action? Most of us, I think, would say we're getting an F. A lot of us would say it's going to be ungraded, actually, because we still don't have the means to say, are we looking backwards, are we looking forwards? When we talk about adaptation, including response measures, when we're talking, mitigation, including response measures, adaptation, including loss and damage, your means of implementation, we disagree about a lot of things. But this is a way in which we benchmark our progress or lack thereof. And this is probably the most important global stocktake, because it sets precedent, but it is also the global stocktake before the 2025 NDCs are meant to come into place. And for small island developing states, or in case of Seychelles, a big ocean state, where we see loss and damage taking place, at 1.1, below 1.5. The last chance for keeping 1.5 alive is by the NDCs of the 2025, and even any action before that. So the global stocktake is something I hope we all pay a lot more attention to going into COP28. It hasn't received as much attention as we would like, but it's something that we really need to say, hey, if we're getting a U, if we're getting an F, how are we going to make sure we move to a C? How are we going to move to a B? So that we actually have a standing chance to not just survive the climate crisis, but also thrive past the climate crisis.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. I think the stock tech as kind of, we can refer back to the stock tech as kind of official UN scorecard and say we are actually, the UNFCCC is saying we're at C or D or F, which I think are the only three options. I just want to also say Tuvalu is also taking the lead on ecocide and the Rome Statute. And Mia Motley was instrumental in a kind of public bank reform. Even the only reason we're discussing World Bank is because of a person from SIDS. So thank you for that. And Joyce, I'll pass back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we will follow up next with Elsie. So Elsie Milan, she's an associated professional at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and she's becoming a PhD candidate at the Imperial College London. You have an impressive bio as well, so I'm just going to highlight some main points. And you were also selected by the UNDP as one of the most promising climate advocates in the MENA region by the, and basically, I met you at the beginning of the year. We were at this IRENA Youth Assembly, and we were kind of pretty much shaping the youth agenda in energy transition. And it's not an easy as well.
It's very hard.
It is not an easy task. So I want you to please tell us a little bit about us, about your involvement with Youth for Climate, but also like maybe the relationship as well that you see with your work and the manifesto develop, and how can it shape as well energy transition, and what are the goals for the Youth for Climate, and how are they going forward?
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. As you said, this is not my first involvement with Connect for Climate. For me, it started, I come from Lebanon. It's a small country in the Middle East. For some people, it's a dot. For me, it's the world. And we were getting out of COVID, and there was the Youth for Climate, Youth Driving Ambition event in Milan, in Italy. The outcome of the event was to draft the manifesto, which was a document that was very inclusive, but at the same time, it was the document to start a new phase after COVID. So the manifesto involved 4 angles. I'm going to go over them very briefly. So first, we had the Youth Driving Ambition from the title. It was all about involving youth. As you said, we didn't cause the problem, but we have to solve it. So it involved funding youth, collaborating with private, public entities, involving them in their projects, advocating, helping them advocate for the causes that matter to them. I know we're short on time, so I'm not going to delve deep into it. The second one was sustainable recovery. Recovery, the term here is very important because we were getting out of COVID. And it was the time to actually make a change. It was the time to actually put the pillars for a new system, a new world. And it had to be sustainable, so it involved here the energy sector, something that, it is part of my research, what I do, my work, and based on nature-based solutions. That was the thing that we highlighted, that we focused on in our demands. Third, we focused on non-state actors' engagement, because as you know, saying something is inclusive must not involve only researchers, engineers, scientists, but also everyone from media to the tourism to fashion design to music. Everybody can make a change when it comes to this sector, and everybody should be involved. And fourth was the climate conscious society. So as a whole, have a society that is very well integrated in climate action and driving this ambition. Now, we've come a long way since that in Milan. Last year, we were in New York for the Powering Action, and this year we'll be in Rome for the Sparking Solutions. And the Youth for Climate, it's a very inclusive space. It's an ever-growing community where people have their ideas developed, sponsored, funded, and we will see that outcome this year in Rome, where all the youth who rose to the challenge of last year's call, who developed their ideas, will have the opportunity to showcase these efforts this year and show these solutions that are very concrete and that we really need. And yeah, that's basically it. So it's an ever-growing community, and we're so happy to be part of it. I'm proud to be representing my country in this very small dot in this very big initiative. Thank you.
Shukran, Elsie. And I I don't know
Yeah.
which
I'm not gonna
microphone.
move.
I don't know which microphone is that. So yeah, I think that when you were mentioning about manifesto, I can see clearly, it's as well intergenerational cooperation, and maybe it's going to be very important to escalate and to take it to other territories, I guess, obviously including more indigenous people, rural people as well, into not just a conversation, but the action. So about this, I want to ask you to everybody to give us a final word about youth escalating climate action. So basically, what will be your advice for young people out there who are aiming to get more involved in these kind of different frameworks? So we can start with, yeah,
You start
you're
with me?
good, Mike.
Okay, so my advice would be you can start anywhere. So there's no specific point where you can start working. However, for me, it was really being part of this community. Like this ever-growing community of leaders who are constantly thriving for change is very important. And this is part of a way to be involved. You just have to find your niche and start. There's no direct guideline, just the will to change, the will to be inclusive. Also, it's important to be very active on all media outlets, have your voice being heard. I mean, you know the platforms for Connect for Climate, Youth for Climate. Everybody's always there talking about action, providing opportunities. See these opportunities and connect together. At the end of the day, you can meet someone, talk about your ideas, and you can never know where this will lead you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I very much agree with the point of like we need to raise ambition. This is an existential issues. We cannot continue as we have been doing. We need to really ramp up action, and I believe everyone can do so. We can focus on the solutions. That's what inspires people. That's what drives change. Last year, I started my own think tank just randomly because I felt, okay, we need something to shape this space, to bridge this gap, essentially. The Institute for Climate Policy Solutions. You can join that. You can start your own initiatives. You can be part of this one, of course. And whether you believe in like carbon markets or climate finance or whatever, if you don't believe in it, you need to understand them. If you do believe in it, you need to understand them. So my point is also like we need to also understand what we're doing to influence them in a better direction. And finally, I think, I mean, I've been in this space now for 10 years. I'm not that old, but still, I've been in this for a long time. And I think it's very easy to like lose energy and feel hopeless and kind of get into this climate anxiety. I get it again, like every year or every day, more or less. I wake up, but I think we need to choose hope, and this is something that kind of like changed me. I'm not optimistic about the future, not at all, but I am hopeful, and it's a choice. So we can choose hope, and we can choose to do something that can shape the future in a better world. Yeah, a better future. So I think that's more or less my final word. Choose hope.
I think the best thing to realize is time is of the essence. And then the second best thing to realize is that your solutions are around you. The people you connect with every day, those that you go and do projects with, they're very key to this. And from my side, this is not just your 18 to 35. This is your 12 up to 35 and then into 65. So these intergenerational, these views of youth as not monolithic, but basically being very diverse, changing all the time. This is the way to look at it in the sense of getting your partners on the ground. And I think the best thing I'm doing right now is reinvesting in myself, in my studies, and so that I can take on things like ESG, which for many people is just an acronym, but hopefully tomorrow will be something where you see businesses reduce their emissions, where you see their ecological footprint. So I'm definitely in agreement that we need more people in policy, we need more people also in business, and I think we need young people to really invest themselves so that the human resources in any company, whether they're fossil fuel emitter, whether anything, the young people are in those companies changing really the ethos and the objectives of those companies so that we actually have a livable world. So I'll just say youth have to invest in themselves and really understand that they can change the path of certain places, certain communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to take a stab at summarizing that, but I completely agreed with everything you mentioned, including net zero commitment by companies, ESG, and corporations. That is so critical, because so far we just have countries committing to that, and companies voluntarily are doing net zero commitment that they may not stick to. Bjorn, thank you so much for kind of your perspectives on the role and impetus that youth make. And Jeremy on kind of the serious role that small islands play in kind of climate discussion. And then Elsie as well on kind of the cross-sector nature of climate. So with that, I just want to also welcome everyone in the room and online to Nairobi in September. We're having a big climate summit. And it's going to be kind of the biggest moment before COP28. So I just want to throw that out there. It's called the Africa Climate Summit in September. And I'll close the session one now. Please feel free to return to the audience. And then I think we'll introduce our second poll now. This is our second poll before we go to session two.
Perfect.
Is the poll ready?
It says, are you a climate entrepreneur? If yes, what sector? So let's wait for the answers. If not, I also want to hear from the audience here. I think we can.
I think there's a QR code or something, but also like a code. But also feel free to say it in the room.
So I think we have, there
QR
it goes.
code, magic
QR
of
code.
technology. Okay.
There it goes. So we will love from everybody from the room if you can, guys, scan the QR code and see which sectors represented here.
Jeremy said 12 to 65. What about 66?
Trying to be fair on retirement people.
Okay, yeah.
But they can be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a lot at that point.
Wow. All right. Ready? I think everybody is ready. Cool. Let's go back to the poll. Oh, yeah. Perfect.
Fashion. Okay. What's a lot of other?
Not an entrepreneur. We have
Energy.
nerds. Fashion. Other will be. Maybe?
Anyone who wrote other here who wants to say what other is? The gentleman.
Yeah, carbon pricing.
Carbon pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
3 people said other than fashion. That's very interesting. Maybe we can go to the following question.
I think this is the only.
Oh, is it?
Okay. Yeah, I think this is the only poll. So we'll move swiftly to session
Okay,
two.
maybe most of the people said, oh, you see, there was another question. So what are the biggest barriers and challenges for youth climate entrepreneurship? Wow, that's
I think
a big question.
I think we know. I think
Finance.
finance. Where's the
Because
money?
ideas is not that we obviously
Yeah,
like.
where's the money, Joyce? Where's the money? That's the biggest question. Yeah.
I think the ideas and as well kind of the frameworks.
Frameworks, ideas. Yeah.
Are existing as well. Okay, so you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So we'll go to session 2 now. Feature a conversation between a lot of young climate entrepreneurs to unpack experiences and their pathways, their best practices, lessons learned from their individual journey, and the focus will be on how they've innovated, how they've sourced capital, that sort of thing. So I want to welcome Duval Van Zyl to the stage, who's a climate and investment director and a climate and nature enthusiast that advises and invests into early-stage climate tech startup. And then I also want to welcome Bethlehem Abebe, the founder and CEO of Zafre Papers, and Denel Florius, co-founder and COO at EcoCarib. With that, Duval, I don't know, is Bethlehem is not in the room yet, but sit here. Then maybe I'll pass to you for taking us through the session.
Yeah, sure. So I feel a little bit bad for Denel. You're going to have to answer all the questions if Bethlehem's not here. But yeah, firstly, I'm Duval from Sale. I am the Climate and Investment Director at a company called The Launch Lab. And what we do is we invest into climate tech companies on the African continent. We are an early stage firm, and so what we do, I actually like the analogy previously of planting a seed, watering the seed, and sometimes pruning the seed as well, or the plant. So we invest capital, and then we work with our companies for a 12-month period, giving them all the frameworks that we just spoke about. It's extremely difficult building a business. It's more difficult building a business in Africa where resources are more scarce. And where the blueprint looks very different than it does in, let's say, the global north or in more developed countries. So I'm very fortunate today, and I'm very happy to do what I do every day. And I think I'm very lucky in the job that I do. I speak to entrepreneurs, I invest in entrepreneurs, and then we help entrepreneurs grow. And today I get the opportunity to do that in front of everyone and to speak to these phenomenal people that we call entrepreneurs. So. Danelle, I don't know if you maybe just want to intro yourself and just what your company does, and then we can kick around a couple of questions. Yeah.
Okay. Good day, everyone. And again, thank you for having me here. So, I am a greenpreneur from the island of St. Lucia, which is based in the Caribbean. And my company, EcoCarib, specializes in solar energy systems, energy efficiency, energy management, electric vehicle charging. So we essentially cover the full spectrum of energy EPC within the Caribbean region. As it stands today, within our group, we operate in 6 Caribbean territories, and we're really scaling at a rapid rate because there is a real demand for clean energy, for cheaper energy, and for people to improve their livelihoods in an eco-friendly way. So I've been involved in this space since 2014, so it's coming on a decade now, and I know I don't look it, but I'm an energy veteran. So essentially what we really want to do is just catalyze the development of the industry, not only in the small island developing states like St. Lucia or Barbados, shout out to Mia Motley, but we really want to push it at the global spectrum for all developing countries.
Okay, perfect. So I think it's a very interesting sector. It's probably a company and business model that a lot of people here are familiar with. But I think maybe speaking a little bit about tailwinds and when the time is right. So in South Africa, I'm from South Africa, I live in Cape Town. And we've actually been having rolling blackouts called load shedding in the last while. And this has really catalyzed the industry from a solar perspective, because all of a sudden you're sitting without power for 6 to 8 hours of the day. And what happens is government now needs to go away from a monopoly where everything's done by the utilities, and we can speak a little bit about that, to where you actually give power and you give opportunity to private entrepreneurs to start these companies. So I'd like to speak a little bit about where in the Caribbean and in the markets that you play, do you see that transitioning happening much quicker now? And why did you decide to start the company in 2014?
Okay, so right now, things are moving a lot more quickly. The main reason being that we're facing the effects of climate change directly. So we have Cat 4s and Cat 5 hurricanes rolling through the region and causing massive devastation, affecting our economies. And this isn't just an option, but it's a necessity for us. So we need to involve microgrid technologies, which we've been doing. We've seen what happened in Puerto Rico. We've seen what happened in Dominica and other countries throughout the chain. Luckily, we've been spared in St. Lucia, but I mean, for how long? So we really need to be resilient in the way that we implement technologies. And why I started EcoCarb all the way back in 2014 is because I found a passion for green energy, but I also saw the necessity for it in the region. And what we really did was we saw a wave coming. And this wasn't just a wave for us to develop our countries, but a wave for us to protect ourselves and future generations. So we built a surfboard to be able to ride that wave. And the wave has now reached our shores. And I'm glad to say that with my business, and other businesses in the sector, we're surfing and we're really helping empower a lot of people on all levels. So from the way they produce energy for their homes and businesses, to the way that they power their cars, and the way that they manage their ecosystems in the energy sector.
And just a quick follow-up. So if you look at the industry and penetration rates for fossil fuels compared to renewable energies, what would you say the percentage split is currently if you look at the sources of energy?
Okay, so in the Caribbean, I mean, we talk a lot as islanders, and what has been the real limit in where we are now has been policy and action. And of course, we have that issue of monopolized utilities. So they've been kind of slowing down the process. But overall, the market penetration has been about, I would say it's about 15% now throughout the region. Some countries, we have higher penetration than others, but we're getting there slowly. We've all mandated CARICOM to really have at least 40%, 35 to 40% of the power coming from renewables by 2025. I don't think we may hit that, but I think it's closer to 2030. And we're doing things on the ground to really help make that happen.
Thank you so much. So I just want to introduce our other entrepreneur, Bethlehem. We just did a little bit of an intro, so if you can maybe just give a small background on yourself and also what Zafri Papers does, that would be amazing.
All right, thank you very much, and apologies for being late. I had to run into another meeting. So I am Bethlehem from Ethiopia, founder and CEO of Zafri Papers. Zafri Papers is a company that makes paper from different agricultural wastes. It's 100% tree-free. So Zaf means tree in Amharic. So the reason why we go by the name Zafri is so that it's tree-free. And then it sounds cool, so that's why we went with Zafri. So we mainly focus on making paper from agricultural wastes that are unbleached, and specifically for the packaging industry mostly, because we believe, that especially the fast-moving consumer good industry is massive. And one, there's a lot of opportunity, and at the same time, we can actually collaborate with a lot of corporates, in the process of, also helping them have a sustainable packaging solution. So that's what we're working towards too, and of course, saving a lot of trees, fighting deforestation, and at the same time, so the challenge when you say you are you're producing an eco-friendly product is the process that you use, because as a business, it's always not very easy, or it's very challenging to be 100% eco-friendly, including your process. So as much as possible, we also try to work towards that. So not only the product is eco-friendly, but we also try to make our production process 100% eco-friendly. So we use 98% less water only for the pulping technology, 98% less water, and 98% less energy, and 50% less water compared to the existing pulping technologies that exist. So it's called Z-foam. In-house, I can say in-house developed, I'm going to use the tech term, in-house developed pulping technology. And then we make sure we also have that circular economy included in our strategy. So we work with small farmers. So we take the fiber. So we work with banana farmers. So we collect the steam. We extract the fiber, and then we still have waste that can also be reused as an organic fertilizer for the small farmers. So we also try to work with the small farmers in that sense. So yeah, it's very challenging, quite challenging, to have a visible business and at the same time eco-friendly business. But as much as possible, we do our best. So yeah, that's basically where we are.
Thanks. So I think every single time that you've got an innovative solution like that, where you've got paperless paper or tree-free paper, that's something that a lot of your customers might not necessarily be aware of, or they might not have been educated in. So I think two questions on that is, Bill Gates coined this term called the green premium. So when you are building climate tech businesses, when you are starting out, there's usually this green premium where the product is more expensive. And then as technology improvements, as you scale up, you can actually get to some sort of price parity. So the first question that I've got is, on a pricing perspective, how does your product compare to current incumbent products? And then the second one is, what's the biggest concern? So I'm assuming a lot of people haven't heard about this treeless paper. What's their biggest concern in switching to your product? So first question, price, and second question is product concerns.
Luckily, actually, more than you think, now treeless paper is becoming more famous, especially we're in Europe. So like I'm seeing a lot of treeless paper products. So it's actually, there is the awareness. And actually, I think sustainability and being eco-friendly is the new sexy thing, like fintech. So there is the awareness, which is great. When it comes to pricing, as much as possible, we were trying to price it less than the product that exists, but that came off as a challenge because, as I said, we were trying to be too eco-friendly, so which means replacing the current process with a little bit more expensive approaches. So which means we have to adjust the price. So the price doesn't have any difference, but what we're working towards too is the quality. So at the end of the day, if we are able to compete with the quality that the wood pulp have, then why not? So we're actually working towards that. In fact, we've partnered up with ABM Biv to work with some of their brands, Stella, Corona, to provide them with sustainable packaging. So we've been selected as part of their accelerator program. So we're also the vendor for ABM Biv. So you know how they're conscious when it comes to quality. So that's actually pushing us to work to that level. So yeah, at the end of the day, if we have the best quality, why not sell it with the same price? That's what we decided. So that's our approach. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I think when we did the poll, everyone knew that the biggest barrier, or one of the biggest barriers, is definitely financing for early stage startups. And I think I'm going to open this as a broader question, both of you can open, is to say that what has been your biggest challenges when trying to raise financing? And also give us an idea if you've raised financing as yet and the type of financing that you have raised. That would be great to kick off this.
Okay, so this has been the elephant in the room for a lot of us. And what I did to try to solve this issue is essentially, at first, raising financing for a green business. It is not easy because a lot of people, they don't understand the importance of what you're doing. So you first have to try to convince them that it's a great opportunity. And some people just don't care. So you have to make sure that your numbers make sense. And you have to ensure that you are actually bankable when it comes to the project that you're working on. For us, what we did is that we tapped into the French side of the Caribbean market to raise equity for our business to scale. And that was in a partnership with a bigger player. So corporate venturing is very big for us. And I think a lot more green startups need to take advantage of that, because there are companies that need to have a green mandate. And by you working with them, you can tap into those resources. And that's what we did. When it comes to us actually giving access to financing for the customers, we really had to educate the bankers, the credit unions, about what this opportunity is in solar energy and how it can benefit their clients. So we had to actually hold their hand and take them along the journey of what this investment is, how is it important, and also how it can benefit their clients and their bottom line. At the regional level, we're also working with CARICOM and recently launched something called the Credit Risk Abatement Facility. And what that essentially is a 80% collateral that is given to people who want to get funding for their home or their business. And this is really impactful because a lot of people, they don't have that collateral or they don't want to risk their assets. So this is really a great initiative that was created at the CARICOM level to enable people to transition to renewables and to catalyze the development of solar energy within the region.
Okay, finance and innovative business, especially when it comes to, climate-related innovations. Yeah, as he mentioned, most people don't care. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the feasibility is very tricky when you're trying to be very eco-friendly. And, since you're trying to sell, an eco-friendly product, you're also conscious of the things you do. So, like, aligning that with the investors' needs, which I also understand where the investor is coming from, because if he or she is investing, then it needs return, right? So to align that, it's very challenging. But for us, I think we were very lucky enough to get people that actually care and would like to take the risk and invest in this kind of business. So actually there are people and organizations and corporates that actually care about this and would like to take the risk and invest on these things, right? So that is your target. Whoever wants to actually pursue this journey, that is the target. So for me, when I raised, I was specifically looking for angel investors and impact investors, right? That's what they call themselves. So specifically angel investors and impact investors, they know what they're putting themselves into. So you take the risk together, right? That's why they're called angels at the end of the day. So that was my target, and the finance is out there. As challenging as it sounds, in a very funny way, it does exist. Except what doesn't exist is that, like, we don't have a lot of mature businesses. So if you're in the idea stage and you don't have that much traction, it's not going to be easy to attract these investors. Even though they're angels, they still want their return, right? They will take the risk with you, but for them to take the risk with you, you need to show them how capable you are to actually, make this work. Like, are you going to take this? Are you going to quit at some point, or are you going to take this far with me? So that's what matters. So they don't specifically invest only on the idea, but they invest on you, on the founder itself, right? So you need to assure them that you will make it no matter what. Regardless of what, you will make it. So if you assure them that, definitely there is money out there. There are people who are willing to take the risk with you and go through the journey. So that's how I see financing. So it's not like, the elephant in the room, but it's also possible. And I've seen it with my own, experience. So, yeah.
So I'm not sure when the both of you actually ended up raising financing, but a lot of times when we work with entrepreneurs, like, it is very difficult at that idea stage or that MVP stage to raise financing, because a lot of the investors in this space comes from, let's say, a private equity background or very financial driven. So it's very difficult to sell that dream, right, at that early stage. So I'm also very curious we've got this term that we teach entrepreneurs called bootstrapping, where you need to be very innovative at the early stage of a company to use your resources as efficiently as possible. And always find you can taste the grit and the perseverance of an entrepreneur through that early stage journey of how they were able to get their first client without having any money, how they were able to convince their friends to build their data infrastructure for them. So I'm curious to hear from both of you if you've got any interesting stories as to how you bootstrapped, how you managed to get your first client, and how you managed to get your business off the ground.
All right, that's a great question. And for us, like, we really had to start small because in the region, people didn't understand the technology at all. Like, they used to ask me, is this legal? Will an electric car shock me? Like, we got a lot of different types of questions, so we had to really educate people first. And along that way, what we did was that we tried to tap into any grant facilities that we could. So whether that be in Trinidad, Jamaica, in other parts of the world, and with that came the opportunity for me to go to these countries, actually live there for some time, and connect with the right people to get some type of money flowing back into the business to help grow it. Now, we bootstrapped for 5 years. Along that time, what we really did was we used grant money to help cover operating expenses, and also we closed a lot of corporate deals. So we focused on business to business first before we went B2C. So the benefit of that is that it takes the same amount of energy, essentially, to target a business as it would take to close a residential client. So we're like, you know what? We're going to put our time and energy into that. So when we closed one commercial deal, it was like closing 10 residential deals. And that really helped us to meet the margins that we needed to survive and to get to that point where it was bankable and interesting for the investor to want to put more money into us to help us grow.
So yeah, as he was speaking, I was trying to remember how we bootstrapped. So for us, the most challenging part was it's a B2B model. So we sell our product to huge clients that wants to buy in bulk, right? So we can test it at a lab scale and stuff, but for us to actually make our first sales, we had to have a huge amount of product, which means setting up a factory, right? So initially, I started selling big. I was not selling a small business. I was more of selling a big factory that will supply to these factories. But then through the process, what I realized was I was just selling an idea, right? With zero finance, zero experience and stuff. So we decided to make samples and then test it with the factories and then secure commitments from the factories so that, it will be much easier to convince other investors or anyone who would really want to be part of this. So we immediately tested that, and surprisingly, because there's a huge demand in the country, there are only 6 paper factories that wants to buy the pulp and then the roll paper that we were proposing. They all signed commitment with us, which was amazing, right? So that was that's money, right? It's pre-revenue, but that's money, promising money. So that really helped us to, fundraise and get to the point to where we are now. But in the middle, to test the MVP and stuff, grant was what got us, to this stage. So because we had the grant and also we joined an incubation center, a local incubation center. So there was a grant coming from that as well. So that's actually what helped us, bootstrap.
So I've got one more question just on the financing, and both of you mentioned grant financing, and we find a lot of entrepreneurs out there in the grant ecosystem looking for the right type of grant, because what we've seen with companies is sometimes they just end up taking grant after grant after grant and not building a business and not having a clear focus. So the grant actually distracts from them building their core business. So I'm curious to understand from both of you as to how you went about finding the right type of grants, and what is it that grant funders are really looking for? How is it different than, let's say, an angel investor, for instance?
Okay, so for us, like Bethlehem said, we really took part in accelerators and incubators, and we ensured that these accelerators and incubators were green tech focused or technology focused. So these were people who understood the industry to a certain extent, and they really knew what was required for you to grow your business or what you needed to implement. So they focused the money on areas of the business that were necessary for its growth. So whether that be training us on marketing and training us on how to sell, how to raise capital from future investors. So all these things we were really groomed on. One of them we took part in was the Caribbean Climate Innovation Center, which was a World Bank initiative as well, I believe, and it was also sponsored by the Canadian government, and it's still operating till today. So having gone through this program, I'm also now helping them with the new cohorts that they have coming in. So you can see how one entrepreneur helps another. And what is really remarkable about it all is that it really helps us to get what we need when we need it. And for you to really be able to access grants, you really need to know your business model, understand it well enough so that you can explain it to other people, explain it to the funders, explain it to other future investors, and you really need to dive deep into who your team is, because that was the most important thing. You could say you can have a great idea from now until forever, but if you do not have the right team to execute on that vision, it's worthless. So make sure you have those superstars on your team.
So for me, so one point I want to make when it comes to startups getting a lot of grants and then not focusing, yeah, that is true, definitely happens, but it doesn't come from a place where the entrepreneur just wants to abuse, but it basically comes from, I don't think a lot of people really understand this, but when you choose to become an entrepreneur, you're giving up the rest of your life. Like, you are on a survival mode, literally on a survival mode to make this happen, right? Which is very challenging. So you being on a survival mode and then still trying to make it is just, it's very funny. So which means the grant that comes not only helps your business, but also helps you to survive so that you make it. So that's where the tricky part is, right? So because this entrepreneur is in a survival mode, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get this grant, you're like, oh, now you have everything. So you get tricked. So you feel like you're going to do everything, right? So that's where the tricky part is. So what I really suggest when it comes to giving grants is also to consider this, to consider the status of the specific entrepreneur that is taking the grant, because it really affects the business, because at some point the business is you, right? It's not separate. So it really affects the entire thing, literally. So at some point it starts to be a bit addictive because you know what to say in order to get the grant. So you're very smart now, so you just keep collecting these grants and then never focus. So that's where the gap is, right? So that's what I really suggest for whoever wants to give grant to actually consider these points. For us, we were focused because we were in an incubation center. So the incubation center makes sure that we focus on the business model, as he said, on our team. Like, we mainly focus on making the business happen. So we were, I mean, even in the incubation center, there were some other that were distracted and never made it. But for us, I mean, specifically for me, maybe it's a personal thing. I was very much focused in making it as a business, so I didn't mind. So like I was pretty much focused, right? So focus is everything, as he said, and then team is everything. Like choose the right partner. Choose the right partner, as in like not the same talent, but someone that complements what you don't have, right? So team is very important. Focus is everything. That's how you make it, whether it's grant or investment or anything.
Okay, so the last question from me before I think we hand over to the audience for some Q&A is, again, both of you have just mentioned the importance of team, and what I found very interesting with climate companies is sometimes you can hit above your weight because of your mission and your purpose, where you could get individuals that might be taking a 40% lower salary because this is really what they want to do. I think great stories of Patagonia in the early days and the type of obsessive employees they had. So I'm curious, again, from both of you, is have you been able to get great talent, even now, but also at the early stages of your company? Because it's always difficult to say that you need the rock stars, but sometimes the rock stars are very expensive, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. They're extremely expensive. So what we have done is that we've growth acted. So by working with the French market, we took advantage of a program called VIE, whereby we could get interns from the top business schools or engineering schools in Europe. So we maximized that opportunity, and by doing so, the government would sponsor a certain percentage of their salary and their accommodation. So that really helped us to save a lot of money as a growing business and to also get the rock stars that we needed to make things happen. I mean, it has its benefits, it has its pros and cons, because usually you have them for about a year or two. But after that, you have to try to convince them to stay within the company. Thankfully, we've done that with a few people. And as in doing so, what we have done is actually secured a base team that can now help us to grow the business, not just in the EPC space, but also add technologies to what we're doing. So we want to scale, and we're actually looking at capital and code. So by focusing on these two areas, we're increasing the bankability of the business, and really that would enable us to get access to capital at higher levels. For example, from oil companies that are looking to pump money into the green space, we are now a lot more attractive because we're hacking the system and taking advantage of the code and the capital. So we have platforms that are already running on electric vehicle charging and on solar energy sharing. So we're using those technologies to really help us grow a lot faster in the Caribbean, and also we're targeting growing in developing countries in the African continent as well.
For me, that's still one of the most challenging things we go through as a company, because to get those rock stars, it's not easy, or you have to pay a lot. So one of the things we do is, because we needed a higher level expert for the product team. I am not an expert. My co-founder is not an expert when it comes to paper. We just know that we can make paper out of agriculture waste. That's it. We don't know how to, get to to meet the ISO and TAPI standard, the international standard, and so many things, right? So we tried to hire this expert, but she was very expensive. So the only thing I had to do was literally pitch for her and sell her the vision of the company, and make sure that the passion is contagious. Like, she also have the same passion to make this work. And of course, in promising her maybe future employee stock option plans, and other promises, right? And then, of course, just selling her the potential, basically. So that's what we did. But apart from that, other partners really help us. So for the ABM BIF team, they've given us dedicated team that we don't pay, that are just supporting us. So that's quite helpful, because it will help us operate with the level we want to. So working with this kind of partners really adds a lot of value. But in general, people's management, I don't know if you have a good experience. I'd really like to hear from your experience. People's management is not an easy thing. In fact, one of the most challenging things that we're facing, and as a company. One thing I learned: every individual have their own goals, so you can't expect them to work 24/7 like you do. You can't expect them to have the same passion and stuff. So making sure that every employee or every team member that works with you is motivated on a daily basis. That's what I understood. That's my job. I need to always find a way and be creative of how I should keep these people motivated and on the point. So it's one of the most challenging things that we have. So I'd really whoever have this experience, I'd really like to have a conversation about this later on.
I think I'm gonna hand back to Jabri now for the Q&A.
Thanks to Val for taking us through this discussion. And Bethlehem, Daniel, I really appreciate your expertise and sharing your perspectives. And I hope you do stick around for the networking we'll have, where you can have discussions like this after. I want to also just do key takeaways from what I've heard, especially from the two of you. Daniel talking about how you access capital through maybe earmarked funding specifically for green businesses. That's kind of your target. And a lot of public money, DFIs, IFIs do this sort of thing. And also I was really, because I'm working also in the energy sector, kind of hearing your kind of demand for, hearing talk about the demand for decentralized grids and energy security, especially what Duval was talking about in South Africa. So the state utility kind of monopoly is making businesses go kind of off-grid. They're setting up captive power plants because every product in South Africa is a coal product. So meaning when they're targeting exports into Europe, any product you make, it has a very high carbon footprint. So factories are going off-grid to manufacture with green power. So it's really interesting that this will take off, especially when state utilities are kind of fossil heavy. And also, it's fantastic to see two people who are doing social enterprise by local people, So it's kind of homegrown solutions. That's actually the key, and also nature is a big part of climate, which you kind of stopping deforestation, mitigating that. And also, going from grants to creating real value, kind of from applying for grants into kind of being profitable and kind of the business standing on its own two legs. And about the green premium, I think the more we make stuff, the cheaper we can make it. We just learn how to make it cheaper. That's how, the US started doing this with solar PVs, but then it stopped. And then China saw the opportunity, and now solar PVs, especially utility scale, it's the cheapest. But maybe the last thing is Kenya has 86% renewables in our grid, highest, I think, in the world now. Meaning, actually in Kenya, people don't know how to do coal. We've never done it in our country. Now we might never know, which is a good thing. And I'm thinking about comparing with South Africa, where they have to retrain every single co-worker to be, a solar or wind worker. It's quite interesting how, this is why Kenya has like a big climate agenda, because it's a profit agenda at this point with the country set up. With that, I want to introduce the poll. Maybe you can put in the stage, and I'll welcome back my colleague Joyce to the stage. And then a big round of applause to our panelists, which I'll welcome back into the audience. Thank you so much. So I'll just introduce the poll, Joyce,
Yeah.
and then I'll pass it to you to manage
we
it.
can read it actually, and then we can get the answers from the audience here.
Yes, I think the first one is, do you have a clear idea of your climate career path? Maybe Joyce, you can, while they scan the QR code, you can talk about your climate career. Yes and no, 50-50.
What about here in the room? If you can maybe raise your hand. Of course, you might have idea of
Yes.
your climate path. Everybody?
So only, yes.
Only.
Elsie, raise it higher. And no, but I think you can talk about how you found kind of your climate career yourself.
It's kind of a story. I'm going to tell a little bit about at the beginning of session 4.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, I'm still finding out, but it was, actually I've been 15 years climate activist and I'm under 30, so it's still a
From
long
15
story.
years old,
No,
you're working.
before 13,
Before that.
yeah.
I think also it's clear, I think the only thing I'll mention this before we go to the next poll is that it's clear to find your sector in the
Yes,
climate. Climate in it
exactly.
of itself is not a sector, so it can be comms or energy or food systems, carbon markets, etc. Every job you have now, including accounting, legal, is a climate job. So that I would recommend you, whatever you're interested in, there's a climate part to it. So maybe with that, we go on to the next question. Joyce?
Yes. What sectors are you focused on? I think we had a similar question at the
Similar.
beginning, but this one is a little bit, you know, the one that you're focusing on and the one perhaps you want to. Technology. So we have finance, energy, technology, communications, other, movement and coalition building, great, wow. Policy and communications. Actually, we have this afternoon a training about communications and journalists and communicating climate change and climate innovation. Perfect, okay? I think
Yeah,
we
good.
got a good panorama.
Yes, and a lot of other. I think we need to know what that for people.
Oh, there is.
So yeah, thanks so much. We had a lot from entrepreneurs, and now we'll go to session 3. I think this is especially when you want to professionalize your career and you're not an entrepreneur, which is kind of a very risky enterprise, and you have to have it really kind of in your blood. We're going to talk about kind of professional career paths, making climate action your career, advice, skills, and opportunities. This is the part we'll be really relying on the audience to ask a few questions. So just keep that in mind. We'll be passing the microphone. I'll walk to you and back. So if you have a question, you can feel free to ask us or anyone in the room, actually. And this focus on, and the representatives from sectors joining for discussion with questions from both audiences and virtual audiences. And you'll have an opportunity to kind of ask about how people have found kind of a, profitable career in climate,
Yes.
as well as how to upskill your current existing roles, and also kind of discussing climate finance, climate policy, clean power, energy, kind of career paths. So with that, maybe tech team, we can introduce the recorded video where I spoke with one of the World Bank executives. So with maybe the power of technology. There it is. Okay.
Welcome. To kick off, we're delighted to have Ms. Lilu, our External Affairs Officer at the World Bank Group, joining us. Lilu, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Jabri. It's a pleasure to speak with you today about climate, opportunities for young people, and nexus between them.
Thanks very much, Lee. We only have 3 questions for you. So my first question is if you could tell us a bit about the climate work at the World Bank Group more generally.
Of course. So the World Bank Group is the largest multilateral financier of climate action in developing countries. Climate action is a top priority for us. We work with our clients to address their climate and development needs together. We do this through 4 pillars. The first pillar, at-scale responses, including policy support that is tailored to clients' needs. For instance, in implementing their NDCs and LSTS. Second, cutting-edge analytics, including our latest products, country climate and development reports. Thirdly, climate finance. including our own lending and operations. And lastly, crowding in private finance, including through de-risking instrument and innovative approaches such as sustainable bonds.
Oh, that's very exciting to hear and quite informative, especially as there's a ton of momentum around IFI reform and catalyzing climate finance at scale. So it's really good to hear what the World Bank specifically is doing to this degree. My second question is around kind of what opportunities does the World Bank Group have specifically for young people?
Sure, happy to give you a walkthrough of the opportunities we have for young people. At World Bank Group, we believe that young people are critical stakeholders. We engage with young people worldwide through partnerships, advocacy, campaigns, consultations, knowledge sharing, and information exchange. So first, you can be an advocate with us. Teams across the World Bank Group are engaging with young people in the advocacy space to raise awareness, amplify messages, and mobilize support for our advocacy goals. Second, you can be a knowledge leader with us. We are keen to share our knowledge with young people, and also this sharing is mutual. We also want to hear from young people and let them share knowledge with us. Third, you can be an ambassador with us. We are keen to provide young leaders and ambassadors with platforms to engage and represent their views and interest on key development issues. Fourthly, you can be a social entrepreneur with us. We recognize the unique value of young social entrepreneurship. Many of our projects are also working to further establish an enabling environment for young entrepreneurs and their future initiatives. And finally, you can be a young professional with us. The World Bank Group has a variety of recruitment programs and employee engagement initiatives aimed at young professionals. These programs aim to attract and retain young professionals who demonstrate a commitment to international development. So if you're interested, definitely go to our jobs website. That is www.worldbank.org/jobs to find out more information.
Thanks so much, Lee. I mean, this is kind of typical World Bank being a leader in meaningful youth engagement, both kind of ensuring youth engagement is a priority within the bank, but also ensuring outside of the bank that youth priority remains a priority for stakeholders. I have one last question for you, and it's kind of an amalgamation of the first question and the second question around if you could share some recommendations for any young person or just anyone more broadly who is interested in having a climate career.
Sure. So I have two suggestions. First suggestion, know your skills and plan to close the gaps. So some climate careers will require specific expertise, but many will not. Your current skills are probably transferable. For example, analytical skills, communication skills. That's why you should think about what you enjoy most about the work you have done. And also make a list. Make a list of core skills that you'd like to build on. If you are just coming out of college or it's early on in your career, this still applies. We all have soft skills, right? For example, adaptability, problem solving, working well with people, and leadership skills. But in the meantime, let's admit that this is also a competitive field. So you must take time to learn. In some cases, it would just mean taking a class or picking up a new course. But for some highly specialized roles, you may need a degree. Second suggestion, think broadly about what problems you want to solve. Climate jobs can be wide-reaching. For example, at the World Bank, we've effectively mainstreamed climate into everything we do. So if you look at the sectors we work in, yes, climate is a sector which we have a dedicated team covering it, but it's also a cross-cutting issue that spans into all other sectors we work in. For example, water, agriculture, transport, energy, even gender, health, education, literally everything that is relevant to development. So think about it. What climate issue do you want to tackle? Is it specific, like renewable energy? Or maybe it's broader, like mobilizing young people concerned with climate change. So ask yourself if you prefer a particular sector. It can be public, private, or nonprofit. So when you have some ideas, study relative relatively new job postings on some of these sites, right? Do research. For example, the job postings on the World Bank career website usually have very clear description of the responsibilities and the requirement. So this is definitely a very good place to do your studies and also do some research.
Thanks so much, Lee. I think this is such a relevant resource you've shared in the World Bank career site. And thanks for the wisdom. I mean, I wish I had some of this when I was starting off my career. I'm now working in the energy sector as it pertains to climate, but I did a number of other odd climate jobs before I landed here. With that, any last words from your side?
Probably one more suggestion to wrap up. We are here because we share this common passion for better planet. So this is really encouraging. And also so good to see many young people are recognizing the need to take action on climate change. Passion is definitely very key to any career. But I'd say patience is also as important as passion, because when it comes to climate work, there will be progress made and results achieved. In the meantime, frustrations and setbacks too, because as we all know, this is very difficult work, right? So it's probably more challenging than many other areas. So if you want to pursue a climate career, it will be a long term, right? So don't feel frustrated if there's some setback. And in the meantime, always be prepared for the challenges that will come and focus on what you can achieve at this moment. Thank you so much, Jabri, for having me. I look forward to connecting with you all again in future.
Oh, nice.
That was nice.
So Les, I'm wearing the same shirt in that video. You can, I think, do the introductions to the panelists.
No, we have Benjamin first. So yeah, I think, oh, hello, Benjamin. I hope you can see us. Can you see us?
I can see you. Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much for joining us. So I think Jabri is gonna introduce you.
Sure.
You got it there?
Yes.
All right.
I'm going to give a short bio of Benjamin Bolton, who is the head of Europe for Terra.do, a global platform for climate learning and work, and is a growth leader, expertise in scaling tech internationally at Google and Tubular Labs. As a climate action specialist, Benjamin has a decade of experience in marketing, branding, and comms. So Benjamin, maybe pass to you to talk about a bit of your work and how you got started and some of the roles of Terra.do. So pass to you.
Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to be here today to discuss how young innovators like yourselves can center your careers around scaling up climate action. And after all, you know, an average career comprises around 80,000 hours. So for most of us, it makes it, you know, it's our best opportunity to have a positive impact on the world. I have got a few slides that hopefully you might be able to see. But if not, maybe whilst those are loading up, I can tell you a little bit about my own journey. Yeah, my career journey kind of at a high level, I worked in tech previously and have kind of transitioned into essentially climate tech. But the truth is, it was more of a squiggly path from A to B. So perhaps moving on to my next slide. So needless to say, climate is changing everything at internet scale. Over half of the global economy is being directly disrupted or transformed, making, you know, the climate economy, if we want to call it that, comparable with the internet economy. And this means that the climate work landscape is vast and diverse, spanning sectors from renewable energy to climate finance, policy and communications, some of which, you know, we've already heard from this morning, and each of which plays a crucial role in our collective response. Now, in terms of some of the trends, we're seeing perhaps 4 broad shifts. So understandably, specialist sustainability roles are becoming a lot more important. So think of, you know, everything from solar engineer to sustainability manager. And so we're seeing, you know, an expansion of skills and scope in those types of roles. Secondly, we're seeing increased need for green skills in non-specialist roles. So we often hear this term green skills. I want to take a moment just to define that. So it's an umbrella term for the technical skills, knowledge, behaviors, and capabilities that we need to tackle, you know, 3 core environmental challenges: obviously climate change, decarbonization, but also nature and biodiversity and waste and pollution reduction, which are very much interrelated. The third transition we're seeing is really workforces from unsustainable sectors moving to new roles. So obviously a lot of just kind of transition considerations there. And then lastly, we're seeing demand for green skills in sort of net new green sectors and organizations. I think a lot of new climate technologies would fall into this category. And so if we really want to understand the landscape, which is my next slide, it's really helpful just to actually understand the science and the solutions landscape. So these visuals are from our friends at Project Drawdown. I'm sure many of you have come across previously. And so, we can understand, well, look, where do emissions come from? Which sectors and verticals need to decarbonize? And how are emissions removed? Kind of what natural carbon sinks do we need to protect? And then, within each of those industries, we can see which solutions are emerging, and also how we can, support and promote carbon removal and kind of build better, more resilient societies. So this can be a really helpful way to think about areas where you might ultimately want to work. Next slide, please. But the headline trend here is we're seeing a massive accelerating demand for these green skills. And this slide, this is from a LinkedIn report, hopefully gives some examples of what these skills look like. There's a rising emphasis on interdisciplinary skills, systemic thinking. Obviously, these crises require solutions that span traditional sector boundaries. And so it's interesting to see that when we look at the concentration of green skills by different industries, we see often, everything from the built environment to renewables, perhaps areas that we might expect. But when we look at the industries where these skills are growing the most, actually, then we see, apparel and fashion, investment management, a lot of these industries that are being reshaped at, at a rapid pace. So if we move on to the next slide, but we have a huge challenge, which is the talent supply isn't scaling enough to meet this massively accelerating demand. And so we're seeing talent bottlenecks, and really we think that this is at TerraD, that this is something we don't talk about enough. And so actually this LinkedIn report from last year is forecasting that in the next 5 years, demand for green talent is expected to outstrip supply. And when we think about, how much work has to happen in this critical decade, obviously this is a huge, huge problem. And so really that's where what we do at TerraD comes in. Moving on to the next slide. So we're building the world's largest platform, bringing talent into and, upskilling talent for the green economy. Our mission is to get 100 million people working on climate solutions this decade. That's roughly 1% of humanity, which we think is a very conservative estimate for how many people will need to be kind of directly working on climate solutions this decade. We offer climate learning programs that can help you gain the skills needed for a career in climate work. And we believe in making climate education accessible and relevant. And our goal is really to help make climate action your career. So on the next slide, I guess the question is, why aren't there more people working in climate, and young people especially? Well, despite this demand, there are perceived barriers to entry. These include a lack of knowledge about the opportunities available, limited access to education, and also the misconception that you need to be a climate scientist to contribute to climate solutions. And actually, a recent study from Force of Nature of 2,000 young people in the UK found that 85% of them wanted to work in climate, but 39% felt they didn't have the right skills or experience. And we see this the whole time. These barriers aren't insurmountable. So we often hear particularly these points around skills and experience. So I want to dive into those. So, I'm not sciencey, or I don't have the right skills. Well, as we heard earlier, every job is a climate job, or can be. Your skills are needed, they're applicable, they're in high demand. And we see this a lot with all the climate employers that we work with. As I mentioned, there's an increased need for green skills in non-specialist roles. There's a lot of non-technical roles that are open. We have a jobs board with about 10,000 roles. And it's not just kind of hard green skills. As we heard earlier, there are lots of soft skills which are, extremely important in this work, from communication skills, being able to explain complex technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders, adaptability and flexibility. The field is evolving rapidly and could be challenging. creativity and innovation, as developing new solutions to complex problems is absolutely critical. And then lastly, empathy and emotional intelligence, understanding how climate change impacts people and creating kind of people-centered just solutions is obviously incredibly important as well. So you can really apply your skills to any climate job with effective storytelling and being able to kind of basically position how you are relevant to that role and organization. And the last point here on experience, you don't need previous experience to work in climate. Yes, in many cases it's preferred, but for many roles it is not necessary. And actually very few candidates have this when we look at just how fast these spaces are kind of expanding. So if in doubt, apply. Too often we see candidates disqualify themselves, yet on the other side of the table, we see a lot of employers who just can't find enough qualified candidates. So for the most part, you can learn what you need to on the job. Obviously, a baseline understanding is helpful, and that's where I think going on some form of learning journey can be really beneficial. And then lastly, project-based work can be a great way to kind of build your experience. So moving on to my next slide, the real question is, where do you fit into this landscape? And this can be, this is one of many great tools that exist to be able to start to kind of figure out what this looks like for you. This is called the Climate Venn. It's from Iona Elizabeth Johnson. And it is a way of thinking about, what do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? What are your skills? And what's the work that needs doing? And perhaps one other one that's, you can include here is kind of what can you be compensated for? And if you can find the intersection of those kind of four considerations, then you can have a really, really rewarding career that, that is financially sustainable for you, but also has a really critical impact at this time. And I think a really helpful question here is, how can you empower the climate ecosystem? The answer to that question will look very different from one person to the next. So really just wanted to conclude by saying on my last slide that there is a climate job for everyone. Your skills are needed, experience isn't essential. So really, ask, how can you empower the climate ecosystem? And really excited to hear and take some of your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, yeah. Thanks, Benjamin, for kind of outlining some pathways for our climate career. And there are many different types of pathways. You don't have to be sciencey, as you said. It could be coalition building, advocacy, comms, etc. So with that, I wonder if we can take maybe one question from the audience.
Or maybe we have online questions. I think it was very interesting, kind of the last slide. Maybe we can go back for us to analyze this as professionals or as actors in the climate sector, right? It's like how to find your passion and your vocation, actually. So maybe, I don't know if someone had like any specific questions here for Benjamin. Yeah, please, can you provide the mic? We have a question, Benjamin. Just hold on a sec.
Hi, can you hear me?
No, yet. We're activating the mic.
Hola.
Yes, there he goes.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, I am...
Oh, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, sure. My name is Leire. I'm from Spain, from Valencia. And I'm here I came with the master's I'm studying, which is a master's in international commerce. So basically, I just wanted to ask about your previous experience and how you got involved in climate, because they said you had experience in marketing. So I was interested in how you transition from, I don't know, maybe corporate marketing into working for climate. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Delighted to share a little bit more about my journey. So I spent the better part of 10 years working in kind of basic commercial roles in tech companies, typically doing kind of regional go-to-market type work for American headquartered technology firms. And I, as part of my transition, as I say, it was a little bit squiggly. So I started by actually freelancing for climate tech startups. And having done a little bit of that work, I actually met my current CEO and was one of Teradoo's very first learners. So we run learning programs. And for me, that was just such a transformative experience. It kind of opened Pandora's box in a positive way to help me understand the ecosystem and kind of what my place in that could look like. Shortly after that program, I was part of another program called On Purpose, which was really a impact kind of year in industry impact accelerator type program, where I had the opportunity to work with 2 organizations over the course of a year. And on that program, I essentially was working corporate sustainability. For one placement, working more with large corporates in the run up to COP 26. And that was just really, really fascinating. And then I had the opportunity to work in-house at a B Corp that was quite kind of, let's say, progressive on climate, to kind of put together and sign them up to the Science Based Targets Initiative and put a strategy, 5-year strategy together for them. So I had like 2 very different lenses on climate action within organizations. And then I had obviously kept in contact with Tara. I was a member of the community and really passionate about the work that was being done, within the community, and had a lot of conviction around the opportunity to scale that work here in Europe. And so essentially I ended up pitching my role to the CEO. I had a lot of ideas of kind of things that Tara could do. And that culminated in kind of putting together a bit of a business plan. And in the course of doing that, I actually realized that everything else I'd previously done had set me up well to be the person to make that happen. And so, yeah, it was one of those moments where I thought, I'll just give this a shot and see what happens. And I'm really glad that I did. So I joined Terra about a year ago.
Thanks.
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 That helps.
Yeah, no, very helpful. Thanks, Benjamin. I think you created your role, if I hear it correctly, which is
effectively, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the key, because even the role I have now, I also pitched it because I thought it's a gap in the team. So maybe that's in the organization you work for or you will work for, pitch it. Because climate, there's a lot of action, but there's also momentum, and there's a lot of money in climate. So it's good to think about that when going forward. Jace, maybe I pass back to you now.
Yes.
Or we could do maybe one more question.
I think, do we have another question maybe, or I don't know. Yes, we have one more. Okay.
I was just going to ask quickly, in the ESG
Can you
space,
pass
how much...
just a sec so he can hear you?
I was just going to ask, in terms of with ESG becoming more of a greater pull, how much of that is changing the outlook on things, or is it already factored into the outlook in terms of where maybe the European market is going vis-a-vis what the US is doing in terms of putting in ESG as part of a big part of the laws and the policies? So I'm just wondering how much of that is accelerating the trends that you'd put on vis-a-vis LinkedIn, or is included in that? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a massive, for instance, we've started more recently actually delivering like learning programs directly to organizations. And I think this kind of enabling policy regulatory environment is really driving a lot of momentum on within organizations. So absolutely, I think this kind of trajectory and acceleration of demand for these skills is being fueled by policy and by this new kind of regulatory framework around ESG. Absolutely.
Cool. I'll wrap up. I just want to quickly say that ESG for what we call non-state actors, especially companies, is so critical in all 3 scopes of emissions, from scope 1 to 3, because there's some corporations, multinational corporations, that emit more than countries. So we have the Paris Agreement for countries, but we need to kind of legalize, professionalize emissions reductions for companies. Yeah, so I wanted to quickly reflect that. Jace, pass to you now.
Thank you. No, we want to thank Benjamin. Thank you for your time, for what you're doing, for opening spaces as well for us. I think, and we know that, green jobs aren't just part of our recovery plan, but a new reality. And especially even if we think in adaptation sectors, like for Latin America, it represents just a great opportunity, because we're having a lot impact, but also we are having a huge rate on unemployment. So I see a great opportunity, and I'm glad we're having kind of these spaces. So thank you very much for joining us today, Benjamin, as well.
Thank you for having me. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. So we will move on to our panel session. For this, I would like to invite, we have Amal, Andre, and Akhilesh to join me to stage, please. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I want to introduce Amal. She's an investor engagement officer at Afric Invest. She's this is a Pan-African private equity firm supporting fundraising and climate-related initiatives. And she's a young Tunisian as well climate activist. So welcome. And please, can you tell us a little bit about how you started your journey? What's kind of the role of your involvement in these initiatives of Youth for Climate, and how this is shaping your career?
Thank you, Joyce. Hi, everyone. Pleasure for me to be here and to speak after the amazing people who actually, I think, provided a lot of inspiring remarks. So yeah, as you mentioned, I do work as an investor engagement officer in a Pan-African private equity firm, which is called Afric Invest. It has multiple lines of businesses between venture capital, private equity, and private credit. And IFC, which is the World Bank Group private sector arm, is one of our investors. But maybe a bit of a background before that. I mean, climate activism or climate was around as a scout. I am always connected to nature as a global shaper, and recognizing how the climate is one of the top, the first in the top 10 risks identified by the World Economic Forum. It was always in the scope, but to have it included in my day-to-day business, I think that dates back to when my government or the Ministry of Environment in my country, Tunisia, launched this open call to recruit or to select some young people who can, who should or would join the Tunisian delegation to the UNFCCC negotiations, known as COPs mostly, but also the intercessions and everything related to negotiations. And I happen to be selected among these young people. So today, Tunisia, among its party delegation, has young people embedded in the delegation and who negotiate on its behalf. And then the journey started. It's a voluntary position, but of course, with climate being something that connects to all of us, and with climate being something that means to all the young people who joined me in the team, this is something that we took really seriously. And then this is when I started negotiating on behalf of Tunisia on climate finance. And that was before COP26. And then with the growing momentum of the private sector role for climate, and then with hopefully what is going to come with the MDBs, reforms, etc. So Afric Invest, despite already having climate embedded transversally in its initiatives, so we started having more interest and more dedication to climate efforts, and this is how climate got to be into my job. So just to maybe here, the bottom line is to say, when I first started, climate was not precisely part of my job description, but out of a personal interest, out of the global recognition of how this means to us, especially for our continent, Africa, being one of the most vulnerable one, being responsible of less than 4% of the GHG emissions, but also having a lot of opportunities in there. This started to be part of my job, where we are currently looking for developing more climate initiatives. And to the last part of your question, I think that I really had good opportunities to showcase a lot of this work, also working with the Youth for Climate team. Maybe one of the highlights is how we could engage together to showcase the enhanced youth climate engagement for the MENA region. That was back to the MENA Climate Week, the first ever one, where we wanted to showcase to young people how they can be part of this. This is not an adult discussion. This is far from being one. This is our own discussion, and it is important that young people own it. Thank you.
Wow, such an amazing background and history. I think, like the fact that we start, maybe some of us with activism and then become, like country negotiator, it is qualifying, like the activism, and also is bringing other realities, and it's very important as well to have obviously more youth involved as well as negotiators. And I hope this year even we have more, because it's a struggle, right? It's difficult sometimes. I think, okay, because you have certain age, maybe you don't have that experience, and also to break this perspective of not necessarily after an age I'm an expert. So this is just leading by example. Thank you very much, Amal. So we will continue with Andre. So he is a co-founder, or ISIRA, is that how you pronounce it? And he's an international energy and climate expert. His activity focuses on climate and energy policies, concentrating in energy transition and geopolitical processes, economic and social challenges. Thank you for joining us, Andre. And I would like to ask you specifically, what are the opportunities for us in the energy sector, but also how the SDG 7 is actually shaping these green jobs in the future.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here and to join and to share the panel with such amazing speakers and professionals. Yeah, I mean, we've talked before about that. The energy sector in general is changing, is in a continuous changing process. We are talking about the energy transition. Maybe it's not as fast as everyone wants it to be, but things are changing. Now, for these reasons, I think the skills, and we've mentioned that, and Benjamin has mentioned that, the skills that we are now required for this transition and for the next energy paradigm are different. And we are talking more and more about cross-cutting skills, cross-sectorial skills. So having this multidisciplinary approach in how we develop ourselves as youth and as employees of the sector, I think it's key. That comes both with challenges, because obviously we will need to, or youth in general needs to somehow learn more or to be better at more things than other professionals were 40 years ago. But at the same time, there's opportunity in that, because the sector, an incumbent sector by definition, is now opening, and it's now accommodating new skills. At the same time, I think the opportunity of, let's say, pardon my word, but importing people from other sectors is an opportunity now, because, and I'll just give you an example, the digitalization process of the energy sector enables the movement, the workforce movement from other sectors, from the energy sector and from other sectors to the energy sector. That will also, in my opinion, help a lot and boost, let's say, the gender balance when it comes to the energy sector. But it has the potential of balancing the gender gap that we know. So there's a lot of opportunity in this transformation, but I think we also need to be realistic and understand where this demand for new jobs are coming from. We are moving from a labor-intensive energy sector, operational sector. So we all know that, for instance, coal generators have a lot of employees. We are moving towards, the renewables sector, in which, from an operational point of view, it's less labor-intensive. So we have very few people operating a wind park. But that's good, because labor at the end of the day means costs. So costs are dropping for renewables. That's the reason. That's also one of the reasons why renewables are more competitive. But new ecosystems in this energy transition and new, let's say, energy paradigm are being created, and new sectors and subsectors are being created and reshaped. Once again, a good example is digitalization, is creating new jobs, new opportunities, like any other employee sectors have done in the past, in the history of employment, if you want. So we don't need to look for one phase-out job from coal generators to one new job in renewable generation, but we need to look at the wider ecosystem of the energy transition and the climate, let's say, ecosystem that Benjamin was talking about. So that would be, I think that there's a lot of opportunity, and it's for us and for youth to grab it and to capitalize on that.
That's perfect. I remember about energy paradigm. I love that word. When I started studying energy engineering, they changed the name to renewable energies engineering. So it was reshaping kind of the full curriculum. And I remember many people were concerned. They said, you are not going to find jobs here in the region, because where I live is we have the second biggest hydroelectric plant, Itaipu, actually. So it is, everybody was like, you're not going to find jobs. And we do. And we kind of find even more new kind of paradigms in building, even working in off-grid, in different areas,
Absolutely.
even energy justice, how energy
Absolutely.
justice is being included in this new multidisciplinary approach. Thank you very much. Okay, so last but not least, I want to hear as well from Akhilesh. So he's, oh, you have a mic, I didn't notice that. So he's a director from Bring Back Green Foundation, and he's a founder, director, from Bring Back Foundation, and as a non-profit based in India, focusing on climate issues. And also you are a UN India Youth Climate Delegate. Thank you for joining us, and I would like to hear a little bit about your work, the work as well in Yungo that has been leading in terms of capacity and capacity building in youth, and skills and knowledge that will kind of enable us as well to be part of the climate field. And as well as leader of this NGO, what's your advice for young people who want to set their own organizations?
Yeah. Definitely. First of all, thanks for having me. I would probably take the second question first, and then answer on, sort of the advice for new people to join, starting up their own nonprofits or organizations. I'll just maybe give a bit of background very briefly on how I ended up starting an organization in the first place, because it's a very interesting story. In terms of, I was just out of school, so one of the interesting things that I noticed from this group amongst all these speakers is probably I'm very new in terms of the climate space, just 5 years into the space at the moment. And I built an organization which is already 4 years in age. So it just took me 1 year to set up an organization, gain the experience. And the reason for that is I started working in the climate space when there was this huge flood in my state in Kerala, in India, the southern state of India, which was one of the worst after a century. And in all the utter chaos, we lost like around 500 people. But in this chaos, there was something beautiful that happened where we saw resilience and unity of people coming together, especially young people. So one of the defining points in the rescue missions and working to rebuild the state was the involvement of young people in the process. And seeing the power of young people and me also being a volunteer in that process made me understand the value of how much as young people we could contribute to the redevelopment of the state, as well as helping people, communities, and a lot of other things. So I just started out a campaign, seeing a couple of plastic and waste management issues that we saw, which was associated with the floods. And we saw massive success in that. But then I soon had to leave for Australia for doing my bachelor's, but didn't feel really great in terms of leaving all the impact that we could generate back in Kerala and India, and going to Australia. And it really bothered me. So just almost into a year, I dropped out, came back to India, set up my own organization, which was a Bring Back Green Foundation. And now, almost into 4 years, we have been a major stakeholder in doing a lot of waste management, policy advocacy, working with coastal communities, and a lot of other issues with the state government, and giving suggestions to the national government as well in terms of policy advice and a lot of other things. So this quick transition has necessarily put me in a condition to experience all the challenges that would also come in, with just 1 year in the space, having little background experience, but as a volunteer for a couple of organizations, how I just had basic understanding of how nonprofits work. So setting up a nonprofit, the finances, setting up a team, all those sort of different challenges, I had to face it all. And I think the best advice for someone who is planning to start out their own nonprofit or organization would be, first to create a team which would really stick with them. And that's one of the essential things that really helped me from the beginning. The people who I started with is the people who are still with right now, who are really helped to promote and implement our initiatives. And another thing is never, shy away from raising funds or trying to raise funds. It's a very difficult space, but sometimes you think you can carry on with yourself, but we found it very difficult. And it's very essential that at some point that you start looking for funds. It's best if you do that from the initial stage itself. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult, going into the long term. Another thing would be, there will be very small impacts and success that you see in the beginning, but then the way you celebrate and look at those impacts and taking forward would really determine how you're going to carry on your impact and then go forward. So another last thing I would mention is maybe in whatever you're taking up with your organization itself, finding the possibility for scalability is very important. Even if you're doing local climate action, finding that scalability component will definitely help in terms of making your organization stand out as well as creating more impact. And then coming back to Youngo, briefly, Youngo, for those who don't know, is a mandate in the UNFCCC, a constituency, a mechanism to bring in young people. It's not an organization. It's one of the 9 constituencies in the UNFCCC to, like I mentioned, to work with young people and children. And Youngo really provides capacity building, provides opportunities, and helps young people, connect with the UNFCCC and other UN bodies, as well as, helping them connect with relevant stakeholders, providing them a platform to meet other people as well as to engage within these mechanisms, which would be very difficult without having such a space. And given it's a flat structure, it works without hierarchy, everybody has equal voice. So, you have equal representation, you will be able to you learn, use the opportunities and engage. So, yeah.
That's amazing. So basically, I believe from what as well you said about like resilience, about how you kind of grew and create a community out of kind of a disaster, actually, and maybe how we think in collective intelligence, even further, as it was mentioned previously as well in the panel about entrepreneurship, because it is about a team and is working either locally, nationally, transnationally, even internationally. So I think this is fundamental as well for the energy transition, for the negotiation, the financing processes. So I want to encourage right now the audience, I don't know if to open a little bit for questions. I don't know if you have any questions, any comments about kind of what we just kind of were mentioning, or I don't know if we either have comments online. If not, I also have more questions. So please, if someone has a question, this is the time. Yes, please go ahead. The mic, where is it? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no problem. And please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. My name is Ariana Rodriguez. I am a representative here today of Talent for the Future. It's a Spanish youth association working on climate policy advocacy from the youth. And I had a question to the Tunisian climate negotiator, because I was wondering what kind of reactions you usually get when you are involved in these key policy-making processes as a young person, as I am assuming it's probably more difficult as a woman and as a young person to be part of these processes than if you were an old, probably male negotiator, right? So just maybe your personal experience on this. Thank you.
He's also interested in the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Actually, it depends from whom. It depends from whom I'm being surrounded. So basically from the negotiation room, it can be very well positively received. Some people would know that you're not a familiar face, so hence would try to kind of help or would answer. Others might act as if you're not a proper party delegate, so maybe not to undermine the role of observers, but they might not actually consider you as an equal delegate. From maybe other delegations, so this is the same frustration you would receive. And then I think this is where your role as someone who would want to to put on more interventions or someone who want to add more inputs. Of course, this is a bit sensitive because I'm not speaking on behalf of the youth, the rebel youth in me. I'm speaking on behalf of my country, and here I'm representing my country, who is also part of the Arab group, the African group, G77 plus China. So it's a whole process that links to a coordination with our national focal point, etc. And this also brings a personal reaction, sometimes of frustration, because this can be a lot sometimes, especially like COP26 was my first COP, and it was a lot to take on at one shot. But then later on, I can tell that from COP26 to COP27, the reactions around were more or less optimized. People tend to recognize, you base your conversations based on your inputs, and you really take the person out of it and try to make sure that you provide the best interest for your country. So this, of course, this is not like being a delegate might, like from my first intervention, sounds really something fancy and cool, and you're lucky to get to do these things, but it comes with a lot of challenges, a lot of personal sacrifices, and then as my colleagues mentioned in the very first balance, a lot of anxiety as well. So you made it there, and that's a responsibility and your duty. And also, I'm trying to make sure that, as you pointed to, particularly being a young female, sometimes it might be not as accessible as being part of other subcategories. So I think that it is important, or I feel even more responsible of making sure that I showcase to other people who could relate to my position that this is something actually possible. And what it takes is your technical background, sometimes even less, your willingness to learn. I'm not a technical person. I come from a business background, but I try to put sometimes even pressure on myself to learn more, to engage with other people who might have the information. And I try to make sure that I do not get intimidated by the lack of information. This is something that I can work on. So it's a continuous process. It comes with a lot of good moments when you feel like you reach the outcome, which is not always the case, to be honest, especially with climate finance negotiations. Sometimes you build a lot and then, boom, nothing is actually being put forward for the actual submissions or for the actual decisions. But this is, I don't think that we have a lot of choice. We signed up for this, so this is really for us to do it. But thank you so much for the question. Happy to share afterwards more of personal stories.
Oh, that's good. That's very interesting. Yeah, I think sometimes, like, dealing with frustration, especially the last minutes of the climate conferences, and understand that action doesn't stop there. Actually, there is a full process back, to our countries. So I will be back to Andre. Actually, I want to hear a little bit. Yeah, if you can provide the mic. So let's say, I either as a university student, or before university or after university, how can I enter the energy market? Like, even if I'm not specifically from the energy sector, how can I be part of it?
Well, I think there are jobs beyond, let's say, the UN or the World Bank or the negotiation, let's say, field, in the energy sector and in the climate sector. And people are, tend to look at these jobs as, high achieving jobs, and, they compete for that, which is amazing, and we need that. We need people like you in these positions. But at the same time, there are a lot of important roles in very different organizations, in grassroots organizations, in think tanks, in utility companies. Change needs to be done there as well, so at the grassroots level. So as I was mentioning, the process, the energy transition process, and the addressing SDG 7, as you was mentioning, opens up for many opportunities in so many sectors of employment. So once again, international organizations, multilateral organizations, but then businesses, different types of businesses, startups that are created or can be created, utility, incumbent companies, mammoth companies, third-party companies that are not necessarily addressing the energy sector today, but have an impact on climate or in the energy sector. Think tanks, NGOs, all these organizations have, at the end of the day, everyone has an impact on climate and can somehow, by readdressing the way they run business or the operation, have an impact higher or lower in the energy or in the climate sector. So I believe there are lots of opportunities, and communities like that, international communities like GICN, like I2I, like, there are a number of them, are the perfect platform for that. And I think that's a first go-to, let's say, option, or first to go-to, let's say, opportunity for people in the universities or just joining the professional field to try and to be part of and try again if they're not accepted the first time. And that's how we all do. It's incremental, our work. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, and Akhilesh, so I would like to know how actually Jungo shaped, again, I keep forgetting about it, how Jungo actually shaped your kind of professional career, like how, being part of it.
Yeah, I think I have been part of Youngo for over 2 years now, but way before that, I was working on, on a local level with Grassroots, with my organization itself. And, we work on waste management with coastal communities. We have been working on drafting curriculums, policy recommendations, and a lot of other things for a long time. But then this was restricted to a local space, and, to explore how do you impact, your work on an international level. That was how I stepped into Youngo. And probably one of the best example, like, how I can share how Youngo is really shaped could be through an example. So last year at the intersessionals in SB 56, in Bonn, and then at COP. So I got the chance to, host bilaterals with the delegation. So, the union minister of environment or like other lead negotiators from India, which could be sort of impossible from my host country. Like, it might be difficult to reach these people, from your individual country. And then when you go on behalf of Youngo, it's more accessible at these spaces, and, you can reach out to these people. So that's one experience I've had personally, but otherwise also there's a lot of opportunities that come through Youngo, as well as meeting a lot of people who I have worked collaboratively with, over the past few years, and that would definitely be thanks to Youngo. And if someone is interested, they have different working groups working on different themes on your interest, and probably I think since we are at the I4C, one working group would be the finance and markets working group, which someone, if you're interested to join in. So there's a lot of opportunities and cross-cutting areas that Youngo deals with, which you can definitely learn from, engage, and take up with into further opportunities. So yeah.
That's perfect. So I want to thank all of our panelists, and even I think Benjamin is still online, and to thank you for your advices, this knowledge, and also we look forward networking with you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say goodbye to Benjamin. I think he already went. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Benjamin. See you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for dialing in, Benjamin. Maybe I just quickly summarize some takeaways, and then we can do a poll, and then we go to the last session. So I think maybe just from Amal first. I think there's a lot of growth in maybe being in some uncomfortable environments, situations, and going into negotiations. I think especially in the climate space, you can be in a room with a global expert on something and who's been working for decades on something, and you have a seat and you have to grow, and there's a lot of learning. So I feel the exact same way, and there's a lot of also personal stories and a lot of learnings that I welcome during the networking after this. But also there's a key in you can negotiate with your own sector. While I wrap up, maybe you can just scan the QR code while I wrap up.
Perfect.
You can kind of do negotiations with your country. I know Kenya also has youth negotiators, and anyone can join.
Is it like an open opportunity?
They had an open opportunity a few years back, so we have junior negotiators.
Wow.
But it's not. I do have to say it's not always easy engaging with your ministry in Global South. And then maybe just from Andre around kind of cross-sector, multi-sector work, but also upskilling and reskilling, especially in the energy sector. And I think Akhilesh, really fantastic. And I think I just had a thought when you were talking about the flood that led to you setting up Bring Back Green Foundation, and I was just thinking, in especially Global South, there's a lot of talk about how vulnerability, and you need to build resilience. And I always think that there's a bit of a difference between ecosystem vulnerability and people's resilience. So although maybe the forest is vulnerable, the Amazon is vulnerable, the indigenous peoples are very resilient. And also in Africa, I mean, during COVID, every report projection was saying, oh, this is done for Africa during COVID, because they'll never be able to survive this virus, etc., etc. So the people are very resilient, but maybe the ecosystem is vulnerable. So I think it's always good. And I think also people from Global South don't like to be called vulnerable.
And also like that innovation also doesn't depend necessarily on technology, but you have a lot of social innovation. I had an experience that we were working with the favelas. I don't know if you're aware about them. There are like communities in the mountains of Brazil. And fortunately, during that time, we didn't have support from the government to access to electricity or water. So the communities were organizing themselves. And we have even solar communities, and they were even providing water. So we have a lot of innovation going on during that process, social innovation.
Amazing. No, I completely agreed. First question, have you been to UNFCCC Climate Change COP? A lot of noise. And I think we expected this. I mean, it's very hard you can't buy a ticket to COP. You have to be an organization that is UNFCCC approved, has to give you a badge. It has to be a blue badge. So it's always... and then there's also COPs that, many people don't want to go to this COP because of this reason and this geopolitical tension. So there's a lot of barriers, but I think this year in December, is it? In UAE, in Dubai, this is the next COP, and there's a lot of discussion around the outcomes of this COP. So it's interesting to note. Maybe the next one more. Yeah, what is the key ingredient?
To meaningful youth.
And this is constantly changes. And we have more demands when we have this, and it's fluid, but I'm keen to know some of the capacity building.
Mentorship, being heard.
Access.
Knowledge.
Yeah, access is so important. I think it's always, if you come to this event, you should live with at least two mentors.
Yes.
One or two.
Awareness.
Yeah. I think that's it. There's also, what is this? Being heard.
A collective engagement as
Collective engagement. Bridging the knowledge gap. I really like this word cloud we're doing here. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think, because sometimes we say sometimes we prevent like kind of youth washing as well in certain spaces. So I think those are like fundamental steps, and as well as supporting in cooperation, youth cooperation as well, that we can create more kind of opportunities from youth to youth. Wow, this is brilliant.
Ownership.
Diversity.
Yeah.
And it keeps going.
It keeps going. I can't figure out the foresight. No, it's really interesting. And I also, maybe the last thing, and then I'll introduce session 4, is that there's many different types of COPs. So it's not just the UNFCCC Climate COP. We also have the CBD COP about nature and biodiversity. And then there's the UNCCD about land degradation. So there's every kind of UN agency has a big event, annual event. So it has to be aligned with what you're doing. But of course, I think it's because climate is every single thing we talk about.
Yeah, exactly. This year we had, just a parenthesis, in Argentina we have like, I think it was like a second or third COP on the Escazú Agreement, which is an agreement, a regional agreement to protect indigenous peoples, but as well like activists, because in my continent, unfortunately, we have a lot of threats to your life if you are an activist, and also to open information and access to information. So we had another COP, and people were like, why so many COPs? What's going on? We were in 27, now we're in the second. So yeah,
it's essential. I think there's a lot of words here that we all agree. I was kind of nervous about a word cloud because someone would just put in like a meme or something, or like a dangerous word, but it's really good to kind of see this agreement. And then session 4, last session of the day before we break, intergenerational solidarity, making youth engagement meaningful. We talk about meaningful youth engagement because I think when it's not meaningful, you can know in the first 2 seconds of being in that room, and you know there's no outcome. So we'll talk about some existing platforms, some existing initiatives. There's new, there's old initiatives, and there's the YAG, the YAG. This is the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate, which you're the newest member of. Congratulations. And yes.
Thank you.
So well deserved. And Joyce was instrumental in also the Children and Youth Pavilion, first ever at COP27. So
it was a lot youth meaningful engagement. But
and we've been plotting for a long time now, and we'll continue to plot and do stuff. And then and then momentum building. Every year, momentum towards COP. There's a lot of stuff this year for COP28. So I'll pass to you now to discuss all this stuff.
Thank you so much for this introduction. And we have Nisreen El-Saim join us online. She's an environmental and climate activist, and she started her activism back in 2012. She's pursued a master's degree in renewable energies, and she was also part of the first Youth Advisory Council for Youth and Climate Change from the UN Secretary. So I don't know if you can hear us, Nisreen. We also have, I think I'm gonna as well maybe introduce, Hello Nisreen, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you very well. I'm glad to be here today with you both. It's refreshing to hear colleagues' voices after a while.
I'm so happy you're here, and thank you very much for your work as well as part of your experience in YAC. And I would like you to tell us a little bit what are the lessons kind of you learned from being part of the first cohort, and share some concrete examples of the impact and involvement of this YAC in key decision-making processes.
Yes, I think one of the biggest things I learned is that there's many ways to actually achieve what we want to achieve. And these many ways might not be through the normal procedures. I heard you talking about COPs before. And it's not always the member states who will make the difference and make the progress. Sometimes it will be the private sector, and sometimes it will be the scientists, sometimes it will be the innovators and people with tech. As we like to call them, the nerds are the ones who will actually make the change. Also, one thing I actually learned is to differentiate between youth engagement and meaningful youth engagement, because sometimes you actually engage young people and give them space without hearing them and without actually taking their words to action, which means almost nothing. I mean, it's something, it's a progress that we actually made because we were not anywhere before, but it's not enough, unfortunately. And we have right now a fight against time. We have right now a fight against all of the polluters and all of the emissions that we are actually, unfortunately, increasing every day. So only having young people in places without meaningfully listening to them, without having them part of the planning, but also the implementation and different processes is not enough. And it is time for us to say no to anything that is below our capabilities and abilities, to say no to anything that will not actually make a difference, to say no to anything that is actually classify us. So sometimes people only invite people, young people, and engage with them just to say that, yes, we have young people in the process, we have young people in the panel, but no, I'm not just a young people, I'm a young people who have knowledge and professional experience, and this is what I wanted to add, not my age. I'm not adding my age, I'm adding my experience to it. So it is a lot of things we can actually say about youth engagement and meaningful youth participation in different levels. But I think it's a progress that we actually made, and we only can ask for more and more.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Yes. In this dream also, what do you think? How we can maybe escalate, like the actions as well of the YAC and like regionally, as you saw. Like I'm quite curious to know about the impact you have in your region after being part of the YAC.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Africa is still very much behind in terms of the good governance structures and the climate governance structures, and also still also a lot behind in terms of climate adaptation, and being also the lower emitter continent. Um, it is still the most impacted one, and this requires a lot of work that we are still, as I want to always highlight, very far from. Building the resilience of the communities is something very essential, yet it's not yet happening. And climate crisis keep hitting the continent continuously. And unfortunately, other peace and security related events is actually jeopardizing the stability of the continent and adding more troubles to the vulnerable communities and vulnerable people. And we can take a very clear example as my country, Sudan, as we have an armed conflict currently happening. So imagine people who are both climate vulnerable, but also being IDBs or refugees because of conflicts in their countries. It's double effect on them. It's double impact and it's double trouble. And a lot of young people can no longer make their livelihood. A lot of them actually lost hope, which will take the situation into more severe and more extreme situation. I think talking about the SDGs, for example, I mean, I really, as a person, believe in the SDGs, yet I don't believe in the slogan that the SDGs came with, leaving no one behind. I always say that a lot of people were already left behind. The question is how to bring them to the front and how to have some sort of an equal system where all of the population of the planet can access the services, have health, have good education, have clean energy, and also not disturbing the peace and stability of the people, but of course the planet with us. So, I mean, talking about Africa as a region is something I very much love, but it always leave a big sorrow. But what I'm hopeful in is the engagement of the young people and the hopes that the young people and the innovation that the young people have. And also mentioning the YAG and the region, I mean, me and Fatu are both represented and representing right now the African continent, but also both of us are new moms. And this gives even more hope that a new generation is coming, and we have to put our best effort to actually make the planet a better place for the coming generations. So at least for me and Fatu, it's more personal. But of course, we hope to see the Africa as the continent that deserves everything and capable of doing everything, especially that the population there is more than 60% below the age of 30. Yeah, it's still a lot of work to be done. Yeah, yet it's not impossible. It's just need a lot of effort more. Thank you.
Shukran jazilan, Nisrim, and I think we had a conversation where you said, I hope my baby won't be a climate activist, otherwise this generation fails, and it's very deep, and thank you very much for honestly joining us, and we all admire you a lot. So thank you. Oh yeah, let's give her a round of applause. All right, so now I will ask the other panelists to join me on the stage. So please, we have Adriana, Esther, and Geet, please, if you can join us. And Fernando is also online. I'll be back to you, Fernando, soon to introduce you as well. Yes, please, take a seat. So thank you very much. First, we have Adriana Rodriguez. So she's a research associate of the climate consultancy based in Madrid called Climate Strategy and Partners, where she mainly focuses on climate innovation policies in the private sector and private sector engagement. So thank you very much, Adriana, for joining us. And yeah, I would like you to please tell us a little bit about, well, how, like, to give us remarks as well from your work, and as well as how, it's talking about like COP28, how we can have more active spaces for youth.
Thank you, Joyce. And I just wanted to clarify that Climate Strategy and Partners is my day-to-day job, but here today I'm representing the Youth Association Talent for the Future. Okay. I'm a volunteer in this association that has a branch called Talent for Sustainability, and this is where I'm mainly active, and I will bring perspective from both parts of that life that I have. So on the one hand, I just wanted to clarify what this initiative is. Talent for Sustainability aims to empower the youth in the policy-making process, giving them the knowledge and all these ingredients that you have mentioned in the poll that we just did, in order to provide meaningful contributions to actually policy-making, right? And on the one hand, we do this by providing courses, online content. We already have around 102 trainings, many of them online, that you can easily access on what the key climate policies are that we need to influence. And then after this knowledge and training process, we have activities that are focused on advocacy with policymakers, like organizing meetings, organizing events in order to present the policy proposals from the youth for the fight against climate change. And I have two outputs from these that I can explain briefly now, but I just wanted to just make a stop, if I may, and explain why we need more people, more youth involved in the policy-making process, because it's interesting to know that the youth has managed to bring the fight against climate change to the global agenda, and it has been an opportunity for activists, young activists, to show that we're not just passive victims, but we are active agents that want change, and we have the most interest in making this change as fast as possible, since we will suffer its consequences the most. And we have shown there are many examples of youth engagement that has been very active in the local level, organizing, as we all know, the Thunberg movement with universities, schools, etc., to bring the climate change agenda forward. We have also youth engagement in the legal action side of things. So we have young people bringing government or private actors to court based on their lack of ambition. And so we see that the agenda is moving forward. There is legal change happening, but there is research focused on the COP negotiations that shows that the engagement there is not meaningful enough. So we have changed the agenda, but we're still not influencing the policy-making process, which is, in the end, what will actually make the change. That's why I was very interested in hearing from the youth negotiator from Tunisia, because I think that those are the key places where we need to start being more present. And especially from my own experience at the climate consultancy where I'm involved in, we focus on European advocacy of legal climate policy files. And there you see it's a lobbying war. I mean, I have specific examples, but you see a lot of actors, a lot of them status quo, traditional industry actors that are not advocating for climate action, and we need to also counteract those impacts, especially from the youth, because if you see all the polls and if you see all the proposals we have put forward in our organization, but other ones too, we are very ambitious. So we need to start bringing in that perspective also at the technical level, and that's what we're trying to do here in Talent for Sustainability. And just as an example, I mean, the EU emission trading system reform that was being negotiated last year, it was derailed, and many policymakers from the European Parliament said that this was because of the lobbying war that was going on in the Parliament. They were basically harassed by lobbyists there, right? So we need to start being part of those conversations. And how are we doing that in Talent for Sustainability? And I can go in more detail into these outputs later. But on the one hand, based on these knowledge courses we have organized, and then the also training of how to do policy advocacy, we have published a report that analyzes the GHG emissions of Spain and the key actors or sectors that need to decarbonize, and we have contrasted with young people, but also in contrast with scientists to make sure these policy proposals are effective, what kind of key measures the youth wants to see implemented in Spain to lower down these emissions. This is one of the key outputs we put forward last year, and then another one, very important for me, and in collaboration with Esther here from Yongo, we organized the first local conference of youth in Spain, which is surprising, is the first one. Here we put forward a report of key policies we wanted to see at COP27 being implemented, focus on adaptation and loss and damages, focus on climate justice and climate governance. These were the three pillars that we wanted to focus on. And we presented it with the Ministry of Ecological Transition, with the UK Embassy that helped us put together this event. And then I was able to also go to COP27 to present this at some events. And it was great to see that after, in the COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh agreement, there was the inclusion of youth in the agreement, and the recommendation to include youth negotiators in the policy-making process of COPs, which was actually one of the proposals we had in this report. Of course, not only us are advocating for that, but we're happy to see we kind of had some impact on this.
Gracias, Adriana. It is very important as well, as you said, to value youth resource and to have this material as well, this information, because with information, with data, you have policy making processes, and it's very important to see youth empowered in this process, not just sitting at the table anymore, but just proposing what's going to be talked and decided there. Thank you so much. So we follow up right now with Fernando Armendariz. So basically, as we were talking about COP28. So Fernando is actually on the COP28 Youth Climate Champion team. And he's working with Her Excellency Shamal Mazuri at the COP28 Youth Climate Champions in order to mainstream youth participation. And he has more than 10 years experience in the World Bank, focusing on urban water and sanitation projects, including Africa and South Asia. Hola, Fernando. Thank you for joining us. And I would like you to a little bit, please, contextualize as well what's happening in this COP regarding youth engagement, and also how the youth climate action, the champion team, they are working towards our participation there, and also what are the kind of the main engagements that you are planning for youth at this COP.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you. Yeah, you can hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. I was supposed to be in Spain with you all, but unfortunately I experienced some migration issues. So yeah, but it's still so nice to connect with you all. And I've been listening very intently to everything everyone has had to say about meaningful youth participation, and I'm super excited to just be part of this conversation. And I'm taking note every time someone says, there's need for youth meaningful participation at COPs, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. So we know that young people, like Jari mentioned earlier, young people are very resilient, but that doesn't mean that just because they're resilient, they don't need to be part of the conversations about policy making that's going to help them. We all know in this room that young people are going to be the most affected by climate change, and they're doing incredible work, but they're not necessarily included in the conversations where policies are made, and those policies are going to affect them the most. Yeah, as the previous panelists just mentioned, in COP27, parties were called to include young people as part of the negotiations, and there's also, in COP26, there was also a call to involve young people in the implementation of climate change policies. And we know that last year there was the first youth climate envoy here, Dr. Omnia El Omrani, which was a great movement to make sure that there's someone that is really rallying behind young people. And the UAE wanted to really honor that and build upon that, so they created the role of the youth climate champion, which was Her Excellency Shamal Mazrui, who's the Minister of Community Development, was appointed as the Youth Climate Champion. And it's essentially acknowledging that youth need to be participating fully and meaningfully. And the Youth Climate Champion role was really meant to bridge the COP28 presidency, the UNFCCC, young people, and of course Yango, who we're working with very, very closely. So it's wonderful to always see Yango colleagues in the room. And the way that we're doing this is through 4 collective pillars that we like to call PAVE. And I'm very quickly going to run through them, but being coming from the World Bank, I know that in the development world we love our acronyms, so of course we needed to have our own as well. So the piece for participation, again, how do we make sure that young people are participating and going to the COP? I saw the poll that many people have not gone to the COP. But it's not only how do you make sure you get them there, but it's how do you make sure they're in the right places where negotiations are taking place, where they can interact with policymakers and have an influence in what is being decided upon. So part of this is also, from the different things that we've been hearing from young people. It's even things like how do you make sure that hotels are affordable, that people are getting the accreditation they need. So it's, this even goes down to that, what you would think is basic level, but these are important things to keep in mind. The A is for action. So we know again that young people are doing incredible things, but how do we make sure that the work is being highlighted, that we're connected them to people that perhaps can support them with capacity building and resources so that they continue carrying out this amazing work. The V's for voice. So we know that, there's a lot of people that don't even make it to the COP because as we know, there's a lot of barriers to that. So how do we make sure that we listen to young people that don't get a chance to go there, that we amplify the voices, that we take their messages in front of policymakers? And of course, the E is education. As someone mentioned in the previous session, they get to COP and it can be incredibly overwhelming. It's an event that can be quite confusing. So how do we make sure that young people are adequately trained so by the time they get to the COP, they can influence the different policies that are being discussed at COP. So, and again, I wanna leave some time for Q&A, but a few of the things that we're already doing to do this, to kind of walk the talk, is a few of our flagship initiatives. So I hope that many of you heard about the International Youth Climate Delegate Program, which was launched in March, and it's a program where we are fully funding 100 people, young people coming mostly from small island development states and least developed countries, as well as a strong priority for those coming from minority groups, including indigenous people, people coming from countries that have been affected by conflict and violence, and people with disabilities. And again, it's not only about bringing them to the COP, but we are coupling this with a very robust capacity building program to make sure that, again, by the time COP comes around, that they are fully prepared. We are working in this program very closely with Yango, and they had the tough job to sort through an insanely amount of applications that we received. We identified already a small delegation that will be going to Bonn in the next couple of weeks. And then we're hoping to announce the full 100 cohort very shortly. We also have the local delegate program, and I'm so pleased to see Reid as part of the panel, who's one of our amazing delegates who can surely tell you a bit more about what we're doing with them as well. And they will, of course, go through the same capacity building process as the international delegates. And just to mention just one more is we're also doing a global consultation series where we're listening to young people, hearing about challenges and opportunities ahead of COP. We are organizing some discussions between younger working groups and some negotiators here in the UAE ahead of Bonn to understand their priorities. So we're really trying to make sure that the participation of young people at COP28 is as meaningful as possible. And just to mention, in our consultations, a lot of the things that we've been hearing about is just questions about logistics, like, am I going to get accredited? Can I have an affordable hotel? Can it, I use a wheelchair? Can I access the venue? And these are things that we're taking very seriously. So as we continue hearing from young people and from multiple organizations, including the actors, I know that we had a call earlier this month or a couple of months back. So we're very keen on addressing concerns and making sure that young people are very, very much meaningfully engaged, which is the key word, meaningful engagement. So let me stop here. I know I mentioned a lot, but again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Fernando. So let's give a round of applause. It is very important to see kind of these, like these new processes taking place for, as you say, not just logistically, but also like meaningful, really meaningful youth participation. And also we look forward as well to continue with the Children and Youth Pavilion processes as well during this COP. Okay, so thank you. And following up, I will now introduce Geet Abdul Jabbar. So she's a decarbonization and sustainability consultant at AEZJ with past experience in humanitarian response to climate-related emergencies. And you have been selected as part of the COP28 UAE Youth Climate Delegate. So congrats. And also, as we just heard, basically, the remarks from Fernando. I would like, and also we know that you have also been selected as a part of local youth climate delegate program. And can you tell us a little bit more about your experience about this, cohort? And my question will be also how you will localize, from the international experience to your local reality, these participations. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we need the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be representing the UAE Youth Delegate Program here. And it's great to be surrounded by so many inspiring people and hearing from them. So the local Youth Climate Delegate Program is instrumental in empowering young people to shape the agenda at COP28. And it's very clear that the COP28 leadership sees the need to harness the passion and knowledge and just willingness and like passion to create a difference in COP28 and really wants to include youth in these processes and really recognizes the potential for youth to be catalysts of change. So it's been really great being part of this team. So we're a group of 10 people, and just within this small group, we all come from different backgrounds, different interests. So it's been really great working with other people in the country and sharing what our priorities are, sharing what our interests are. And yeah, it's been a really great experience so far. And this meaningful participation, this concept has been mentioned a lot, and this program really showcases that. So far, some of the initiatives that we've been involved in, the first engagement that we had was at an event called Road to COP28. And as part of this event, there were some youth circles, youth consultations, where we brought together some youth advocates in our community, along with decision makers, policy makers, key stakeholders who were there to listen, really give space to young people to talk about what their concerns are, what their priorities are, what they want to see happen at COP28. So it was a really great experience to see that. So even part of this youth circle, we had the UAE Minister of Climate Change, Her Excellency Mariam Al-Maheri. We had the COP28, part of the COP28 leadership team, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion, Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak present. So even just having that like accessibility to leadership is just incredible. And like just hearing some of the things that the young members of our community had to say was really inspiring. There's a lot of passion, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of things that they can share with us that we can really incorporate into the COP28 processes. So yeah, we know that tackling climate change is a really important and difficult issue, and that really requires collaboration and intergenerational solidarity that we're talking about. So it's been, yeah, a really great experience so far, and even within this program, there's a lot of different initiatives that will be taking place. So like Fernando mentioned, capacity building is going to be a really big component of this. So of course, we know that a barrier to attending these conferences, just being involved, is that young people can feel like they don't understand the process, and like Fernando mentioned, there are a lot of acronyms, a lot of technical terms that can make it inaccessible. So having that capacity building component is really important. Yeah, learning more about the intricacies of the COP20, like the COP processes, the negotiations, how decisions are made, who's involved. That's really important. And as part of the local climate delegates, of course, we're going to be bringing in the perspectives of people in the UAE, but also in the region, making sure that's being fed into these global processes and negotiations, because this is really important. Yeah, I'll stop there for now, and if there are any further questions, I'm happy to share.
Thank you very much. So basically, you are kind of the result of intergenerational solidarity, and let's see where it takes you as well, and takes your communities during and after the COP, where we will see the results. So thank you very much. And next, last but not least, we have Esther. She's an interdisciplinary researcher at the Basque Center for Climate Change, conducting a PhD in political science in the Autonomous University of Madrid. Her research focuses on how meaningful citizen participation may contribute to climate change governance and the delivery of just, effective, and legitimate climate action. Wow.
Yeah, researchers like complicated things.
But it's fundamental, because sometimes people don't see it, the engagement, but we do. Not everything is, top down, but also bottom up. And also, I would like you to tell us a little bit about, the Basque Center of Climate Change, and also to also analyze a little bit, can you tell us more details about your research, and what do you think is the impact as well of youth, the climate movement in the EU policymaking processes?
Okay, so thank you for having me, and thank you to my fellow panelists for their inspiring interventions. So I'm hopefully finalizing my PhD on citizen participation in climate governance. That's the simplest way to say it. So yeah, basically, my motivation was more on, okay, we have all these complex climate governance systems, so then how can we, let's say, because we always love to say, yeah, we need to engage everyone, but what does engaging everyone means, actually? Because we see we have these high-level COP spaces where you see like this head of a state, but then the citizenship, who actually will be the most affected in their day-to-day lives, how they can actually meaningfully influence these processes and actually influence the processes that will save their lives. That was my main motivation behind that. And then also because at the same time, I'm part of Yango since 4 years now. So I'm part of the policy team of the global coordination team of Yango. So that also connects to how youth as citizens of the world as well can actually influence in these spaces. And here, as scientists, we love data. So just to give you an idea that we as young people, we are more than 50% of the global population, but we are dramatically underrepresented in decision-making spaces. So for example, when we are presenting policy documents in Django, we like to see that currently there are no head of a state that is younger than 35-year-old. And that's the first time that I looked for that statistic. It really shocked me. We had Sanna Marin before in Finland, but she's not in power anymore, sadly. And then if we look at parliaments and other decision bodies, like the picture is pretty much the same. But why this is important? Because we are now facing like climate and socio-ecological crises that are shaping and will continue to shape our future. So the paradox here that really actually is deeply in my heart is that we have people taking the decisions, but the people taking the decisions are not the ones who will be affected. And just for example, I found this statistic from a study in the journal Science that actually babies born in 2020 will be 2 to 7 times more likely to be affected by extreme weather events, being more likely even if they are born in the global south than people, for example, born in the 60s or in the 70s of the previous century. So what can we do as young people? So now we as young people, I see a lot of my colleagues, even at Django, and my fellow, for example, Adriana as well, we are working mostly in volunteering roles, trying to turn this situation around, to change things, to protect our future, which is, in my opinion, like a basic need. I mean, just like having a future for us, for future generations, ensure our well-being and ensure the well-being of our babies in case of young moms as well. So yeah, and I think, and it's true that we are in the right direction. We have more and more spaces now at COP, for example, and in other spaces. And I think as Django, we are trying this to be more and more a reality, let's say. But I also see that there is a lot of youth voicing, as Joyce mentioned as well, where we see that a lot of young people are being included, but without actually listening to their voices and listening to what they want to see implemented and what they want to do. So, I mean, the solution, I think, is not like very complicated. It's just like when you engage with young people, you really need to be like willing to listen to them, to really listen to them, to implement their ideas, to at least respond, okay, this is your idea, I can't implement it, why? Why I can't implement this? Because like X political reason or because whatever, but at least like consider them like meaningfully so that you are able to say why we can't implement this. And then like, this is a tricky part also, that we have a status quo that needs to change. Because the decision and the type of leadership that we had until now, it just doesn't work. And the socio-ecological crisis that we are facing now is one of the symptoms that the leadership that we have now doesn't work anymore. So the people who are now at the top of the status quo need to acknowledge that and need to give up some power. And that is, I think, the most tricky part. And also, like, in youth participation, but also in citizen participation, that we are now, like a lot of citizens around the world, reclaiming actually their voice in these spaces. But we have these people, these high-level people on top, who need to actually be willing to, okay, let's say we are in this together, and we also need to leave no one behind, but also acknowledge the people who are left behind before, as my fellow speaker said. So so just to wrap up with that, we need to have like young people, and it's nice, the youth pavilion was already mentioned, and also the youth day at COP that I have been like deeply engaged from my work with Django. So it's not to have these spaces. We share these spaces with the UNCCC secretary, with the COP presidency. But at the end of the day, I like these spaces, but I would like more to see young people in the negotiating rooms, as for example, in the previous panel. And this is a problem. So we need youth people in every room where decisions are taken. And I think this is the key message that I would like to pass on, let's say. And with regards to, we can continue on talking afterwards, but we are trying to do this in Django via the Global Youth Statement, which is a policy document that gathers youth demands from all over the world. And then, so we do that with an online survey that is for individuals, for institutions. Also, we gather the outputs from local conferences, such as the one Adriana mentioned, that we organized together in Spain, but there are like hundreds of local conferences around the world that are happening. So we gather all those inputs and then we compile them. And we had honestly like a huge team of volunteers who again, volunteering their time and giving up their free time, which I think is also very important to remark, that these are people who are giving up their free time. So this is never like a salary position. So it's just like, and I think it says a lot about like the interest and really the the passion of young people. So this is a huge document that you could see is like 70 pages or so, where we tackle like different topics, such as the ones more connected to the negotiations, such as energy, adaptation, loss and damage, but also the topics that we think are important to again highlight, even if they are not very present in the negotiations, such as, for example, climate justice. And I think, and the subtitle of the declaration is actually like a youth declaration for climate justice that is just cross-cutting to all of our demands. So yeah, I think that's another fantastic example that was again recognized in the final document of the Glasgow Climate Pact. But again, like I kind of like, yeah, with my first scope, which was actually the one in Glasgow, like I remember reading the final document and I was like, there's a lot of acknowledgement and yeah, but what is the action? Yeah, but what? Yeah, my response was, so what? Okay, so yeah, so in the final document, the Glasgow Climate Pact acknowledges the Global Youth Statement, acknowledges our work, but then, yeah, so what? So yeah, and also encourages youth meaningful participation, but we need to go further. We need, okay, encourages, but I've seen, for example, and I want to be a bit critical now, I've seen that a lot of like parties are engaging young people in a kind of paternalistic way. So it's just like we bring young people for them to learn about the process, while my perspective would be like, you need to listen to them. Okay, yeah, they maybe not know as much as negotiators that have been there for decades, of course. I mean, I'm not saying that. But just the way of engaging them and bringing them to COPs just for them to see the space, to learn. I mean, I personally, I don't think that's the way to do it. And for me, that's not meaningful participation. Meaningful participation is just like, okay, we bring young people to the negotiating team, and then we listen to them. It's also like about intergenerational justice as well, and intergenerational solidarity, that maybe you have a negotiator of, I don't know, 60 years, and then you have another of 20, and they need to like find that compromise. You are, of course, representing a country, but like those two people are representing maybe different age rates of the same country. So yeah, and I can go over and over. Maybe like the question on the European Union, we can go in the second round.
There is no second round. I'm afraid we're running a little bit behind time. So no, it is just brilliant. I think maybe you can tell us maybe where we can find more resources, maybe in your website or maybe this document as well, for us to get inspired. So yes, please just maybe that's just a small question and then we continue. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to do a small remark because I know we're short in time, but answering to what Esther was referring to, and something that I saw missing in the poll we did is the issue of finance. Okay. So as Esther has mentioned, her and I, we helped organize the local conference of youth in Spain as volunteers. And it was a very tough process. And it was only because, for instance, in my association, there is a small, very small core team of people that actually dedicate their lives to this because they're paid for it. That in part, that was why this conference was successful. And also because we found a donor that paid for the event, which also was a difficult process. So the issue of finance, why aren't there more donors out there willing to pay for youth movements and kind of activities? So that's something that I really want to point out. And another thing I wanted to mention is we're also in Talent for Sustainability working towards COP28 to present this set of proposals that we presented in the past local conference of youth, and to do a follow-up of what has been agreed and implemented so far. It was good to see the loss and damages funds starting to take shape and other kind of things that were mentioned in our proposals. So we're working on following up that process and presenting something for COP28. And again, it's a very tough process. It's very technical. We don't have a lot of people in the group, even though we put a lot of effort and passion to it. And again, it's because, as I said, lack of finance, and also because we need very well-structured, organized organizations that are fixed, that are constant, and help us work on these things. And also the issue of youth delegations. As Esther mentioned, I see a lot of youth washing here too, because I'm going to Bonn, for instance, because of my own job, but I will be representing the association there too. And I don't see youth delegations going to Bonn in many countries, which is actually one of the places where a lot of technical things happen and negotiations take place. So that's something I wanted to point out, that we need to start actually including youth in all the process and not just going to COP and looking at the very nice events that are happening there.
Thank you so very much. I want to thank to Nisrim, to Fernando, Adriana, Git, and Esther for your knowledge and for your amazing work. And we will connect either online and also later in our session. But thank you very much, and please let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think that right now we are wrapping up. It's been such an intense but amazing day full of a lot of knowledge. Yeah, you can, thank you so much. I'm just, so now we will keep the energy going. I don't know, Jabri, you want to to help support me with the closing?
Yes, let me sit next to you here. So we'll now invite some of the partners of I4C and a few of the kind of World Bank executive to give kind of their closing remarks.
Perfect.
So first, I'd like to introduce the first one who can give recaps from the Innovate for Climate side, Sudarshan, manager at World Bank, who is a practice manager at World Bank's Climate Change Group's global unit. Welcome to the stage. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we can invite the other persons as well to join us
Sure.
on stage as well.
I'll invite also Julia Braga, who can give remarks for the Connect for Climate side, and then Mitik Zedgea, who can give recaps from the Youth Climate Innovators side. Thank you so much.
Please go ahead.
So maybe I also want to thank the audience, but maybe I can pass to you first, Sudarshan, for your remarks, and then we can go to Julia, then Mitik.
I think it is working.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So I spent quite a bit of the morning with you. The other session I was competing with was carbon markets and carbon pricing. So I don't have to say which one won the poll, because you were very passionate. And I really enjoyed being here. So I would like to express my appreciation, and you guys did a fantastic job moderating. So not just keeping time, but keeping the passion flowing. So I really appreciate it, because a lot of things we in the World Bank also talk about special topics. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of action, but it's good to have some passion. And I saw the passion in this room, and I'm happy to be part of that process of passion building, which is necessary for climate action. And I'm thankful to a lot of the people who presented today online, in person, all those who came from far and away to be here and share your experiences. So I think what I would like to say is that it is important for us to know that there are many aspects of climate action that are going to be important in the coming days when we are discussing these issues. So first of all, there are a lot of discussions about frameworks for scaling climate action. Then there's important for entrepreneurship, which you discussed a lot. And I saw a lot of entrepreneurs here, very, very fascinating stories. And then the last session on meaningful exchanges on intergenerational experiences, which is again, very important. I also think, this kind of forum provides opportunity for you to learn from each other. Because ultimately, if you want to make sure that the youth, the young climate innovators are going to be together, you have to make sure you build a common platform. And the common platform cannot be built by North and South. It has to be brought everybody together. So I really think that today I was able to see that being built in this room. And I think you should continue to work on that, because that's very important. I hope that you will take this, as you yourself said, take the lessons you learned, take the experiences you have to the other fora. Not necessarily for example, starting tomorrow, you're going to have 3 days for Innovate for Climate. And I hope as some of you said, you don't have your voice heard. I can assure you we like to hear your voices. So please speak up, occupy the space, and demand to be listened. Because as I like to say, as we know from the research again, climate activities take place today, the impact is realized in the future. You are the future. If you don't speak, it's very difficult for you to then say that I'm a victim. You cannot be a victim. You have to stand up and say, I want to fight for my future. And some said they want to fight for their children. And that's true. So I, as a father, I also feel the same way. I want to leave the world a better place for my children, because they should say that I didn't miss the opportunity that I was given to speak up, to stand up for climate justice. So in the next few days, we have very high-level panels focusing on very many activities on climate finance, carbon markets, and path to net zero. These are all important topics, but they have to have an inclusive role of the youth. So I hope that you will make all of us honest to make sure in the 44 sessions that are going to be there, you should spread yourself, be in every place where you can actually make your presence felt. And also, I went this morning to the marketplace. I'm sure you can go there and get to learn about different topics, different initiatives, and again, contribute your knowledge and take from there things for the other events that you will be participating. So I would like to pass the floor to my other two panelists because they probably have more specific next steps to talk about. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to sit with you and participate. And I feel really energized that there's a youth that is very seriously taking care of their future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am very glad and happy to be here with all of you today. Some of you I've been, knowing for years, some new faces, and at Connect for Climate, we're really thrilled to continue this journey together. I'm not gonna repeat what has been rightly said. I just want to use a few words that you shared and reflect on those, including planting the seeds. I think we planted the seeds and we are now growing this garden and this community. This is what Connect for Climate does. It's our mission, elevating the stories of young people, young climate leaders worldwide, keeping in mind that when we say youth, we really mean experts. There is this, strong point that I think has to be kept in mind at fora like this one about the fact that when we look at the youth climate movement, we look at scientists, we look at entrepreneurs, we look at community leaders and the expertise and skills that you are bringing to these discussions, not just today, but really over years, is really tangible. I'd like to thank Innovate for Climate. It was a real pleasure to partner at this edition, the first one after a few years back in person. I'd like to thank my colleagues and the Innovate for Climate team. Kaya, Ines, Jenny are here with us, but the team in Washington has been supporting, and Mitik, who will share, of course, her takeaways as well, and Mylen. We are also working at Connect for Climate. We're really focused on partnerships. We are pleased to partner with the World Bank Group Youth-to-Youth community and our Global Youth Climate Network. We recently launched, renamed a very successful program that they have, Mentorship and Ambassador Program, after Max Tabizo-Atkins, a very dear colleague of us, to honor his legacy and memory. And this program is really growing year by year and providing now to over 150 ambassadors the opportunity of networking, of hearing from experts from international organizations, including the bank. We're also very pleased to continue the partnership with the Italian government and with the United Nations Development Programme for the next edition of Youth for Climate, which is growing as well, because it started, as you all know, back in 2021 during the pre-COP in Milan with the Youth for Climate Manifesto, a series of demands that youth have been sharing and posing toward leaders. It is now focusing on solutions, so there is this program that will support financially as well selected solutions in 4 areas this year and will continue then next year. So yes, I think there should be so much more. Joyce, Jabri, thank you so much. You've been doing a fantastic job. It was a long day. Thank you all for joining. And please, as said, take advantage of Innovate for Climate, which officially starts tomorrow, as an opportunity to really meet experts, share your thoughts, ideas, projects, inputs, and network as much as possible. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And yes, I really would like to echo the sentiments of my fellow panelists here. It's been really quite a journey, and so excited to how it has come about. Starting from the moderators, both Joyce and Jabri, everybody here in the room, as well as our virtual participants. Thank you so much. So what I think I'll try to do is, I don't want to stand between you and the opportunity to, informally chat and network amongst yourselves. I know we've had a long day, but just to highlight a few key messages that kind of resonated with me. So the first one, on the policy. As policy is an important tool to being part of the solution, and how young people should be more involved in this. I think this has been echoed in the very last session, but also something mentioned earlier on. I mean, this sort of resonated with me personally as well, because before I joined the bank in my previous role working in the Ethiopian government, I happened to be there during the 2015 El Nino phenomenon, and Ethiopia had really encountered very severe drought conditions at the time, and the caseload for beneficiaries were becoming unmanageable from the government side. But nevertheless, the drought response did take place. Because of the fall in global oil prices that happened that year. So, they just kind of reallocated budget from Fuel Price Stabilization Fund to address the drought needs. But that made me realize, that's not a sustainable way of doing things. There needs to be more sustainable and reliable mechanisms for addressing climate-related shocks, and made me more interested to get into pursuing, my education and public policy, which leads me to my next point, the second key message on, reinvesting in yourself. I think this was mentioned by Jeremy in terms of your education. If you need to go back to school, if you are, something sparks, your interest, passion, please, that's something to consider. And also, upskilling opportunities that we heard from the speaker from Teradu, Benjamin, really highlighting interesting opportunities for upskilling. And the third message, and this is something that Jeremy said, there's a climate job for everyone. right? The demand for green talent is expected to outstrip supply within 5 years, according to the statistic he mentioned. Demand is high. So this is, this is the future, and sometimes you sort of you have to make it happen on your own. I know I've heard personal anecdotes from Jabri, from others about maybe you need to make the pitch on your own to create a role for yourself in some of these instances. So that's another key message. And of course, lastly, on the need for meaningful youth participation, beyond just attending COP, but really being having a meaningful voice at the negotiation table. So those were my key takeaways. But I would be remiss before I close to not to thank Maya-Len from our side for a really critical role she played in having many of you all here in person with us. So thank you, Maya-Len, for holding the fort and really supporting the delivery of this event. And also my C4C Connect for Climate colleagues, Kaya, Ines, really this wouldn't have happened without your collaboration. So huge thanks, and Julia as well for your support. So we wish to have many more continued collaboration in the future. So I think I'll wrap up here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward continuing the conversation. Please, those in the room, please make sure you will stay for the networking.
Yeah, and please join our LinkedIn group, scan the QR code here. And then I also just want to thank everyone in the room for staying here for the whole session and joining us in person. I mean, especially in person, but especially if you have a global South passport and you had to go through Spain immigration. Oof. So I want to thank you for that. And then please feel free to connect with us personally on LinkedIn. I mean, ask us any question. We have a bit of experience in kind of penetrating the space.
Yeah, and as well for the online audience, thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you scan the code and let's keep connected. So, muchísimas gracias y feliz día. Gracias.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. For your support.